Lawyers, has your opposing counsel ever accidentally helped prove your case? Story 1. I had a hearing where the opposing party offered an updated contract that my client supposedly signed, except it was a horrible copy and barely readable. Then he assured the judge that the new contract was exactly the same as the old contract except for the party name at the top. The original contract was in his mom's name, and the new one was in his name, and the date of the contract itself. He made that assurance multiple times after he exhausted himself saying how everything was the same. I then pointed out to the judge that half the provisions were different and that my client had never signed that form. The judge asked if we were really accusing him of forging my client's signature, since that's a serious accusation. I held up the guy's prior conviction for contract fraud and said, "I absolutely am, Your Honor." We won, hands down, no further argument needed. Not a lawyer, I once had an individual accuse me of a HIPAA violation. Sat at a meeting with the hospital folks ready to give me a talk before the case moves forward. She started small talk and I said, "Can we please get into the matters at hand?" Then she starts, "Blah blah blah, HIPAA blah blah." Me, "Thank you, I fully understand the gravity of the accusation. Can you specifically outline why I cannot share this information with said individual?" Then she starts reciting BS hospital policy. I cut her mid-sentence and said, "Here's the document the patient signed that specifically outlines my ability to share this information with said personnel." Amazing how 3 checkpoints failed to look at the damn document, and there I was, sitting in a meeting wasting time. She let me walk out after that and told me that she'd take care of the situation. Felt like a total boss. I imagine you felt 100 times cooler after the "I absolutely am, Your Honor." Ha. I have to ask, why are we still relying on signatures as admissible evidence for a court case? That's absolutely insane to me. I know it's a very traditional part of a contract, but why haven't we moved on to, say, video confirmation, or at least fingerprints as part of the signing process for contracts? The signature is just a means of expressing consent. It's not necessarily a confirmation of identity. You regularly enter contracts without signatures in your daily life, like when you buy groceries using cash. Consent can usually be given by words, sometimes even by mere conduct. Imagine silently going up to the till, the clerk silently scans everything, and you silently pay. Other times, the law or the parties will specify that consent must be given in a particular way, such as by signing a written form. When in court, parties sometimes admit to signing contracts because the dispute is about particulars rather than about whether there was a contract at all. If one party claims the signature isn't real, then handwriting experts or ordinary people familiar with that person's handwriting can be brought in to verify the signature. To avoid fights about signature validity, you can get the contracts notarized. The notary certifies that he or she verified the document of the parties and watched them sign the thing. This is useful for important contracts, and the law sometimes requires notarization for certain types of contracts or other legal documents. Story 2. My dad's ex-girlfriend took us to court over his estate after he kicked her out. Her claim was that she was entitled to half the pie due to de facto marriage. Our claim was that she was a gold-digging whore who planned it from the beginning. She had mountains of evidence of her contribution to Dad's company and running the private estate. Expense reports, receipts, dates and times she and Dad proved their relationship with trips and combined spending, etc., etc. She had so much evidence the judge took 4 days to look it all over, after which he came back and basically said, "Why the hell would you have all of this if it wasn't your plan the whole time?" The case was very downhill from there. I know this is a reach, but this weirdly reminds me of being a junior high catcher and the guy tries to score at home plate. I get the throw and tag him. We both look at the ump, who is just staring at us, so I jump over near him and tag him again, figuring the ump thinks I missed the tag and the guy missed the plate. Ump yells, "Safe!" I say, "What? I just tagged him again." And he says, "Well, that proves you didn't tag him the first time." That's odd because I have all the records of every trip and all the expenses over $500 that my wife and I have made over the last decade. I still have copies of our bank statements going back to 2000, nicely filed away and archived. I think the judge is wrong to rule that way. Surely she has grounds for appeal. Similar story, but it didn't end well. After my dad passed away, his long-term girlfriend passed away also before his estate was settled. I was really sad because I actually liked her, and she had always been so lovely to me and my family. She had been with my dad since I was 7 years old, and she was a super kind woman. After she passed away, her dickholes of children sued us for 50% of my dad's estate, saying she would have received it before she died and it should have gone into her estate. Basically, what they were saying is that she deserved half of his crap, and since she died before it was settled, they figured they were actually entitled to it. In his will, he specifically had a clause that said his girlfriend, my brother, and I were his only beneficiaries, and if one of us passed away before him or before his estate was settled, our portion of the estate would go to the other two, not into our estate. These people were freeloading pieces of crap who lived off of my father their entire lives while my brother and I were responsible human beings who didn't need to ask him for money, had real jobs, paid for our own school, etc. He had to bail them out of jail multiple times, give them money when their rapping careers didn't take off, and let them live at his house rent-free until they were into their late 20s. He paid for their expenses and their vehicles. It was just really upsetting. The real disappointment was when the judge decided they were entitled to at least a third of the estate, so we had to give them a third of what little estate there was. My dad had wanted me to use my inheritance money to get my master's and start a business, but by the time everything was over and we had distributed their portion of the estate and paid for our legal fees, there was very little left. I think he would have been disgusted by what happened had he been alive. Story 3. I had a misdemeanor possession case I was defending. The client was driving his mom's car. He gets pulled over for playing the stereo too loud. There are pills in the center console, in a prescription pill bottle. The bottle has his mom's name on it. The client gets arrested and charged with possession of a controlled substance without a prescription. The case is obviously BS, but the dumbest DA I've ever met in my life won't dismiss it. We go to trial. During closing arguments, the DA says, "This case is a circumstantial evidence case." During my closing, I slapped the jury instruction on the projector that says if a case is based on circumstantial evidence, and there is one factual scenario that points to guilt, and one that points to innocence, the jury must find in favor of the defendant and acquit. My client was acquitted. A friend of mine was involved in a similar BS case. He had picked up his mother's car to take it for some service, got stopped for rolling through a stop sign. A police officer spotted a handgun poking out from under the driver's seat. It was his mother's gun, legal and registered to her. My friend didn't know it was there. The cop arrested him for possession of the gun. I don't know the specific charge. After months of BS from the prosecutor, it was finally dropped. Almost had this happen to me the day I bought a truck. Got pulled over at 2 a.m. after fishing with a buddy due to a taillight being out. My buddy and I were 17, so we were out past curfew. The cop says, "Let me see your driver's license after that. Please step out of the truck." I hand him both of our licenses. I already know that we're going to be in trouble at this point, as we have the same exact birthday, and he has an out-of-state license. And unbuckle when the cop goes, "Hang on, are you two brothers?" He thought my buddy's license was fake because it was so thin. Then after we explained, he thought it was pretty cool and let us go. I took him home and went home myself. Cleaned the truck the next day and found a loaded Glock 27 under the seat that turned out to be stolen. That's insane. My husband works in a pharmacy. In the US at least, anyone can pick up anyone's prescription regardless of the nature of the drug. All you have to know is the patient's name and birth date. It is definitely 100% legal to be in possession of someone else's prescription medication. I'm glad he was acquitted, but damn, he shouldn't have been arrested in the first place, and someone needs to educate those officers. I'm always concerned this will happen to me if I ever borrowed my parents' car. I used to be a nanny and had to borrow Dad's car one day. The kid, age 8, found a gram of pot in a little bag that had fallen between the seats. Probably fell out of my dad's pocket. Luckily, the kid knew my mom grew catnip. He liked to help harvest it, literally the cutest kid ever, so he just handed it to me and thought it was catnip. Of course, we get to his house and he tells his parents, who are laughing and smiling at me because they know what it is. God, I never heard the end of that. Story 4. I'm not a lawyer, but I was taken to court once. A guy had taken my family to court basically because he had been dating my mother and things ended. So he then takes us to small claims court with an itemized list of everything he'd ever bought the entire family. Every cheeseburger, every Kit Kat, He even billed for things he did, like house repairs. Some of the repairs were terrible and ruined other things. He tried to unclog the sink and ended up destroying the main drain pipe for the house. Now, he had bought some more expensive things as well. No one asked him to, but he was one of the types who loved to show how much money he had and would always talk about his connections and would name drop someone anytime we went anywhere. So when he takes us to court with his full itemized list, the judge asks him to go first and present his testimony. He basically says while I was with them, I bought all this stuff. I took them to dinner all the time and all this, but it was the idea that it would be paid back by them. The judge said, "You bought a child a birthday cake with the idea that it would be paid back? Did you ever say that these things were loans and not gifts?" Him: "Well, no, but I shouldn't need to. That's the normal way people think." Judge: "Well, that's not the way I'd think." Case dismissed. For over 6 years, one of my sisters had an online feud going on which started out over a puppy. She was a backyard breeder and wanted to sell me one of her puppies she had left, and I didn't want to buy it. My sister is mental, by the way. My sister started trashing and bashing me in her blogs, even going as far as to obtain public records that anyone could get, but no one would want nor care other than her. She posted lie after lie, even making death threats to me, and the local authorities said they couldn't do anything to her until she did something to me. I decided to make a blog to rebut all the lies that my sister posted about me and prove the things that she had done. This pissed her off, so she decided to try to take me to court. We live in different states. 4 times my sister tried to take me to court. Each time she hired an attorney, took a handcart of plastic bins full of evidence against me, and every time the judge dismissed the cases because of lack of jurisdiction. I don't know where my sister got the money to hire attorneys, but she did. Each time the case was dismissed. She would, of course, blog about it, saying things like, "I can't wait to get my sister back in court. I'm gonna put her on the stand and make her answer to the judge. I will make sure she gets jail time." My sister was hoping she would be the attorney, I guess. When she was unable to bring me to justice, she began posting lies and crap about my son. He too created a blog and posted his rebuttal against my sister. This BS went on seemingly forever, even being posted on a website called ripoffreport.com where nothing ever gets removed, not even with a court order. My sister finally decided to hire an attorney in the city where I lived, and I was summoned to court. She wanted a social media restraining order against me even though she was blogging crap about me, and she started it first. I was like, ho-hum, yawn, okay, I'll go. My sister had to drive from North Carolina to Florida to get a hotel room, and then she claimed in her blog that she hired a driver to take her to the courthouse. LOL. Okay, wow, Miss Moneybags, I'm sure she lied about the driver. I get to the courthouse first, and am sitting in the huge lobby facing the entrance where my sister's attorney approaches me and asks me if I am her. He had never met my sister or me, and I thought that was odd. I didn't say who I was, though. He walks away. I see my sister gathering up her things from walking through the detector, and then she sees me. She immediately makes an about face and walks out. My sister is scared of me, always has been. We went to the courtroom, and I didn't even have an attorney. I didn't need one. My sister's attorney does the talking for her, and I really never said much of anything. The judge basically told my sister that she was wasting the court's time and his time. He dismissed the case. I thought it was hilarious. We went to a court a second time, but it was over legal guardianship of our mother that I won. If anyone is interested in how that went, I will be happy to tell you. This exact thing happened to me, only without the court part. After I broke it off after about a year, he presented me with an itemized bill for all the things that he had paid for while we were together. Some things I had felt like I should pay for, and at the time had tried to pay him. He would always say something like, "I got it, don't worry about it." So I didn't. When he gave me that thing, I laughed so hard. I was like, "Alright, you just go ahead and hold your breath and wait for me to bring you this ridiculous amount of money." He even charged me for half of the meal from our first date, which A, I tried to go Dutch on, and 2, he took home all the leftovers, even mine. When I was younger, my mom was dating this guy who unfortunately she ended up marrying and then later divorcing, and I have a lot of crappy memories and stories about him. When I was in the 5th grade, he bought me this thing I really wanted for my birthday. I never specifically asked anyone for it because I never asked anyone for gifts, but he knew how cool I thought this was. Then, not long afterward, he would use it to make me feel bad about myself, saying that he barely ate for a week to be able to afford this gift for me, and went on about how I hadn't even paid him back yet. I was a 10-year-old kid that a grown man expected to pay back around $50 for a birthday gift. Even as a child, I thought, what the hell? I would have rather just not gotten the gift in the first place if I knew it was going to come with guilt trips. My dad was like this. He expected us to pay him back for raising us with a roof over our heads and food on our plates. He thought since he gave us everything, he was entitled to everything, as we owed him because he fulfilled the bare minimum of the obligations and responsibilities of being a parent. If he had been a halfway decent father, maybe we would have conceded a few things to him, but he was total scum. I haven't spoken to him in years. I honestly wouldn't care if he's living comfortably with a new family to victimize, or if he's still living out of his truck, bathing at gyms and begging for food. Story 5. I'm not a lawyer, but I took my brother-in-law's landlord to small claims court. He's on SSI and I'm his conservator. We sued her for over $4,000 after she just decided she didn't like him and changed the locks on his apartment door. She also stuffed all of his belongings into trash bags and dragged them out to the curb. This was all done the day after she cashed his rent check. It all started because she was letting herself into his apartment with no notice and was going through his stuff while he was gone. When I found out about this, I told him to let her know that was not okay. He did, and that's why she kicked him out. I was very organized and presented the judge with a folder containing photos, receipts, short videos on DVD, and the sheriff's call logs, as well as a concise timeline of events. The landlord showed up with her son and countersued for the exact same amount that we were suing them for, claiming that the apartment was trashed, there were holes in the walls, and they would have to repair everything before being able to rent again. During the hearing, the judge asked for evidence of the damage to the room. The son whipped out his cell phone and showed a video panning and walking around the room. The video showed my brother-in-law's apartment, obviously still being lived in. His stuff was all still there and no visible damage, but there were lots of posters and things hung on the walls. When the judge looked at the video, he asked, "Where's the damage?" The son replied, "You can't see it, it's behind all the posters." The judge frowned and looked at the video again and then said, "Did you take this video when he was still living there at the time?" The son replied, "Yes." This was the clincher. The judge then asked, "Did you ask his permission to enter the apartment to take this video?" Silence. We were awarded the full amount. It's great when jerks are so stupid. I was once awarded $2,000 in a lawsuit against somebody who wouldn't rent an apartment to me because I have a child. That's very illegal where I live. And I was appointed a free attorney by the state almost immediately when I made the complaint to the specific governmental body handling housing discrimination. This lady actually wasn't the only one who refused to rent to me because I have a kid. She was just the dumbest one. I was refused by a few people because they have to de-lead the paint if a child lives in the apartment, so instead of doing what they should have done in order to not discriminate against parents, one called me a terrible mother for considering an apartment, and another called me a bitch. The lady who had refused to rent to me, and I'm rather glad she did, considering what sort of person she is, claimed she had found me suspicious and blah blah. She maligned me in all sorts of strange ways, considering we had only talked for 15 minutes. The thing is, though, she had sent me an email telling me she wouldn't rent to me because I have a child. Oops. As soon as she realized I had the email, she gave up. It's a bad idea to lie to the state of Massachusetts in court. I wouldn't recommend it. But my favorite part wasn't the money, at all. My favorite part was that part of the settlement required her to take weekly anti-discrimination classes 2 hours from her home. My landlords intruded on us in a different manner. We had given our 30 days of notice to leave the property. I had taken a job far away and my wife was away visiting family. I cleared what I could from the place and my wife and her father were going to finish it off when they got back. With at least 2 weeks left in our agreement, they asked if they could start showing interested renters the suite. We agreed, but they did so much more than that. They never gave us a chance to properly clean out our place and started renovating, making the suite unlivable. Despite my wife's plans to stay there a few more days, even while we still had legal possession, They shoved what remained of our stuff aside and then told my wife, who was a wonderful person but a tad gullible, that she had to sign the suite off to them immediately. She did so, and the landlords then filed small claims against us for not cleaning out the place, and for a couple of scratch marks left by my cat. We agreed to those and tried to come to a reasonable compromise. They refused. Anyways, they had the paperwork, and all we had was our word. They won and got their little renovation paid for by our deposit, and a small amount from yours truly. Never rent privately without a very concise agreement. Story 6. I had to go to court over a financial cock-up when I was a student. Took advice from the university legal support team who said I didn't need a solicitor, so I went in alone. The judge didn't like this and postponed it for another date, so I could prove I had more counsel first. The other party's solicitor caught me outside the court and said, "I didn't tell you this, but," and pointed out a huge error in the financial paperwork that made it very obviously come out in my favor. Went back to legal support, got confirmation that it was right, went to the second hearing alone, and got the entire thing thrown out. The other solicitor winked at me as he left. Saved me about £9,000. Nice chap. A question for all of those saying he could get in trouble for undermining his own case. Aren't lawyers who get irrefutable proof that their case is incorrectly required not to argue it? Recuse themselves even? There are a lot of gray areas in law. There have to be. But in something like this, where a clear factual error or typo proves your case is built on a fallacy, it would be unethical to continue the case. Wouldn't it be just as professionally damaging to build a case based on a known falsehood, especially if later it could be proved you knew your case was basically a sham? I'm not saying he wasn't walking a line going to the opposing rather than his own client to pressure them to drop the case, just that it seems to me it would hurt the lawyer to continue the case too. It makes me mad that lawyers can sometimes get such a bad rep. I took a cab once, and the taxi driver asked me what I studied. I told him I was a law student, and he started ripping into me, telling me that I chose a very hostile profession and that every lawyer he'd met had been corrupt. I just bit my tongue and heard him rant the entire time. But I realized then that the profession can sometimes rub people off the wrong way due to its adversarial nature. I've personally been brought up to think that this profession is of high status with lots of prestige, which can be perceived as true to a certain extent, but many people have highly negative opinions of the justice system and lawyers in particular. Lawyers like the one in your experience give me hope for the field. Hopefully I come across people who have had good experience with lawyers and the law as well. I aspire to be like the lawyer in your story. I have a similar story. My dad almost had his car repossessed once. Apparently there was a law in the US or just Ohio, I don't know, that only valuable assets can be seized for debt payment. Valuable in this case was designed as being worth at least $2,500. They got out KBB and put in all the features, age, mileage, etc., and it came out to $3,000. The lawyer for the company trying to repo it said he noticed in the parking lot that the driver's side mirror had some glue on it, and pointed out that if it was damaged, the vehicle should be considered in fair condition rather than good. Brought the value down to $2,500. Was great. Story 7. Not a lawyer, but a relative of a retired prosecutor. A relative was working in a misdemeanor criminal court. Cases get called in alphabetical order, and two women named Catherine Smith and Catherine Smith were scheduled to have their hearings before the judge. Not their actual names, but you get the point. Both had similar crimes but were slightly different, so the bailiff announces the next case to the courtroom. Catherine Smith, for 1 quart of possession of cocaine with the intention to sell and 1 count of prostitution. So, Catherine Smith stands up and indignantly cries, "Whoa, whoa, just wait a second. Where the hell did the prostitution charge come from? I may deal crack, but I'm not a hoe." Easiest drug dealing case my relative ever prosecuted. I am also not a lawyer, but a paralegal. Sadly, it was 2 of our clients who made admissions like this. 1, a guy hires us for a DWI. He woke up in jail and has no memories of being at a bar. Get the dash video, a cop walks up to the door and asks our client if he knows why the cop pulled him over. The client slurs, "I don't know, but I'm drunker and crap." The client proceeds to open the truck door and promptly falls to the ground, blacked out. We quickly arranged for a guilty plea. 2, Repeat criminal clients. She and her family sold drugs in a small town. Gets arrested for exchanging cocaine for a digital camera. Tells the cop that she's not guilty because she gave the guy the cocaine, but never got the camera. So it wasn't technically a sale. She thought it was very unfair that she was convicted for possession with intent to deliver or some crap like that. Oh, that is classic. Reminds me of a dispute I was once tangentially involved with. I work for a consumer reporting agency that conducts criminal background screening. We reported a record from information from a state agency with a charge of murder. The applicant disputed this report, saying it was only attempted murder that she was convicted of. And all I could hear in my head was a woman shouting, "I don't deny I tried to kill the guy, I just didn't succeed." Story 8. Actual lawyer here, from the Fool for a Client file. I was interning at Legal Services after 1L doing discovery work for family law. My supervisor invited us to observe a hearing for our client to get a restraining order against her husband. At the hearing, the client discussed various times he threatened her. The man representing himself interrupted and said, "Judge, I never said any of those things. If I had, she wouldn't be standing here." Restraining order granted. Jesus, this reminds me of an awful story from my parents. My grandma, Mom's mom, told me once that my dad pulled a gun on my mom and threatened her with it. My grandma said my mom called her afterward, and my grandpa urged her to take us to a shelter until she could move out. But my mom didn't want to do that to us, so nothing came of it. A year or so later, they're totally separated, and this comes up with my dad. My dad essentially said the same thing. If I had, I would have shot her. What's more terrifying is that I went to a Christmas thing at his new wife's parents' house, and I overheard him talking to his wife's dad about guns. Apparently my dad's gun had been taken to a shop, and there were a few parts that were broken on it, not allowing it to fire. My dad may have actually tried to shoot my mom that day, but couldn't. Speaking of the Fool for a Client file, the firm I work for had a client we specifically instructed not to talk to the press, a discrimination suit against his company. The application to certify a class was pending, and we didn't want it to blow up. The first time he is approached for an interview, he gives it, and in his remorse basically says, "Did we do it? Yeah, but we didn't mean to hurt anyone," along with sharing plenty of other sordid details. The article gets uploaded to the newspaper website the next morning. My supervising attorney was not thrilled. Story 9. I'm not a lawyer, but here's a story from the burbs. My buddy is in the middle of a situation like that right now. His psycho neighbor built a wall too high and doesn't have proper drainage on his property for the very small creek/natural drainage in between their yards. My buddy hired an attorney as the psycho decided to sue him over it. My buddy's engineer, who looked over the property, noted not only did my buddy set his yard upright, but the neighbor created drainage problems. A neighbor hired his own engineer. That proved my buddy was correct. Now the guy is likely to go postal. The case was going to go to mediation. Since both engineers found fault with the psycho neighbor, my buddy decided he was going to take it to trial. Turned the tables a bit. This is exactly like my parents and their neighbor a few years ago, except it was a crazy old lady who sued them and lost. Then tried getting an injunction against harassment against my father because I shot her dog. It survived. Citing fear of firearms because her dog was shot as a reason. We show up to court and she starts going on about us not wanting a fence around our property and how she needed one to keep her specially trained guard dog, the one I shot, on her property. How she built a fence, but we refused to pay for half of the portion along our property. And we caused flooding in her yard after that to get back at her, despite both engineering reports citing her fence as the cause. And she was just a little old lady being intimidated by my big, scary father. When she finally mentioned the dog being shot, the judge stopped her and pointed out that the dog was the only reason listed on the filing and that she wanted to hear about that since it was the main point of the case. The old lady started rambling about her dog and all its medical bills since I shot it. The judge catches that it was not my dad who shot the dog, but me, and loses her cool over the lady filing an injunction against the wrong person. but decides that she really wants to hear the story. So I told her about how the lady went on about how the dog was a specially trained guard dog that only took orders from her and only in German. I then told the judge how it came that I shot the neighbor's dog. One afternoon, my sister called in a panic saying that she was at a different neighbor's house because a dog had chased her on her way home from school. So I grabbed my dad's .357 and walked outside to go get her. I get about 100 yards from my front door, and sure enough, here comes the neighbor's dog. I yelled the old lady's name and she didn't come out to stop her dog, so I waited until he was about 10 yards away from me and I shot it. At this point, it's still about 15 feet on our property from the road, and 200 plus yards from the crazy lady's property line. I go get my sister, and by the time we get back to our house, a crazy lady is outside screaming about her dog to a 911 operator. Cops show up, see a dog on my property, hear a story about it, chasing after my sister, and decide I have zero faults, and didn't even bother with a discharging citation. The judge asked if she had anything to add, and the lady protested that the dog wasn't dangerous, and the judge reminded her that she herself said the dog was a guard dog and required containment. The lady then goes on a tirade about the fence and the flooding, and the judge starts yelling that if the lady so much as mentions the fence, flooding, or her shot dog again, the judge will find her in contempt of court. So the old lady stops talking and the judge dismisses the case. Then, about 2 months later, we get a visit from someone from the court asking about the case because the lady was accusing the judge of collusion of some kind and claimed the recording of the proceedings had been altered. After that failed, she started calling the sheriff's department on us about every 2 to 3 months, making wild accusations of stalking, harassment, and threats. The sheriff's department finally told her to stop calling, or they would start arresting her for filing false police reports. Crazy ride, that one. Sounds like my mom's neighbor. He added a washroom or something that couldn't connect to the plumbing already set up in his house. So he had drainage from his wastewater just coming out of a pipe into his yard and draining into the section between the two properties. The water ended up ruining half of my mom's front yard and forming a beautiful little swamp. My mom called the township and they fined him and told him to put actual plumbing in, which would require him to dig up most of his front yard. He came over and screamed at us, put some gravel at the end of the pipe, and called it a day. Township fined him again, he gets more PVC pipes, directs the water into the middle of his front yard, and adds larger rocks. He doesn't understand gravity since we live on a slope, so his house/yard is elevated and the water flows back to where it was already settling. Township fines him again. At this point, it was fall, and he refused to do it, since, come winter, he physically couldn't dig up his yard. Township fines him again, because he clearly waited so long on purpose. He claims it isn't actively doing anything since he stopped using the drain in winter. The township engineer had pictures of water sitting on top of the ice when it was about 10 degrees out. The funny thing is, he was fined for so many other issues with the other neighbors, the township ended up hating him and would give him the maximum fines every time.
What is a red flag from an employer that people might not immediately recognize? Story 1. Having to take an online IQ test before even being considered for an interview. When I moved to Australia, I was looking for work as a language teacher. I went to monster.com and found an advert saying that they were looking for teachers for gifted children, but that I needed to take an online IQ test to apply. Needed an IQ above 125 to go for an interview. I took the test, sent in my CV and cover letter, and waited. An hour later, I got an email asking to meet at a special cafe in downtown Melbourne for the following day. So I went and noticed that this building was a Freemason building and that one needed a special pass to get in. There was a little older lady waiting for me in a tacky floral print shirt and a white fisherman's hat. Immediately, she pardoned herself for wearing that hat, explaining that it was lined with aluminum to protect her from the cell phone radiation. I think nothing of it and order a coffee. Off the bat, the old lady tells me how she has an IQ of 160 and the rarest blood type, similar to that of Tutankhamun. She goes on and on about this for a while and then begins explaining the job. She tells me that in the beginning, I wouldn't be teaching but administering tests tests in schools around Queensland to recruit children to special camps, where then I would be teaching. The whole thing screamed red flags, but I politely listened and got her business card if ever I had further questions. I got a proposal on the spot. I looked at the card and it said, "The Wise Ones." After looking it up, I noticed that it was a cult. I stayed as far away as I could from them. The whole situation definitely raised some red flags. From the IQ test requirement, before even getting an interview, to the secretive location, it all makes you question what is really going on. It's always important to trust your gut when something feels off. Story 2. When an employee quits or gets fired from the job and the company doesn't hire anyone new to replace them, it can be hard to tell as a red flag at first, but the temporary workload they added to your own over what was left over after the person left slowly becomes your new permanent workload, without any changes to your pay or benefits to compromise for the additional tasks. The further out it goes, without the position being filled, the larger and more obvious the red flag becomes. Someone added to this by saying, "This happened to me recently. In July, we had a guy leave, had a new guy come in from another division to take over, but here it is 6 months later and I'm still covering the former employee's workload as well as my already existing workload. I asked for a raise last month and I was told you need to take more responsibility before you are eligible for a raise. I applied to other companies and I'm getting offers for 60% more right off the bat." Story 3. Trying to rush a decision out of you once the offer is made. I once interviewed with a company where I would have been relocating across the country to work for them. There were 3 rounds of interviews and they left me completely in the dark for weeks on end between each round before inviting me to the next round within just a few days of when the interview would take place. After the final interview, there was over a month of silence from them until they made an offer, but told me I had less than 24 hours to let them know my decision. I would have been moving 2,000 miles away from home to find a place I had never been or even seen before. Interviews were completely virtual. They wanted me to start 6 days after the offer had been made. When I asked them if there was any flexibility for me to have more time to think it over or have more time to move out there, they said no. They needed the decision the next day, and if I accepted, I would be starting in less than a week. I declined the offer. Wow, that sounds like a major red flag to me. The fact that they left you in the dark for weeks between interviews and then only gave you 24 hours to decide on an offer that would have required you to relocate across the country is really shady. It's pretty clear that they aren't looking out for your best interests, and the fact that they wanted you to start so soon after the offer was made without any flexibility, it's a big no-no. It's good that you declined the offer. You deserve better than that. Story 4. I always ask the question, why is this role open? Is it a new role or am I replacing someone? Why did that person leave? This really helps you see the reaction, and if they look nervous, it's because the person who left did it because they were not happy. I also like asking how senior my team members are. If there's no one there more than 2 years, I would also be concerned. Final question, as I work in sales, I always ask, what's the KPIs and how many are actually hitting their quarterly to annual target? This also reveals if they set their targets too high, and you could expect to enter a grim working culture where you're never good enough and can always do better. Last one, I like asking about how they are working to establish a team culture as well, since this will tell you a lot if people at work are friends or just there to do their job. Someone replied to this comment saying, "These are the questions which I asked in an interview a few months ago, considering Reddit had mentioned this so many times. It's very important who you ask. So the very first round, just after understanding the position, ask the recruiter how many rounds it'll be and who you'll be talking to. It's especially important that this question is asked to your potential direct manager." So I asked these questions in the interview to the manager, and he said the whole team had gotten a promotion. I thought this is extremely good considering they take internal growth seriously. Then he says they took promotions in other companies and basically moved out. LOL. I still ended up taking the interview till the last round just to see what kind of people run the place. When the potential manager told me that this was his second day and said he didn't know what he was doing and was asking questions from a website, I decided to run for my life. Honestly, I think you made the right decision. It sounded like the manager that you were interviewing with was giving you a way out and a hint that maybe you shouldn't work there and it's not a great environment. Story 5. A couple old senior partners, lots of young employees, and nothing in between. That means there's no opportunity to move up. They can't get people to stay and can't get lateral transfers. They work young folks for as long as they can, and the young folks leave once they figure out the company sucks. Someone added to this comment saying, "This is quite exactly what my first job out of college was like. Very small engineering consulting firm. All senior engineers/directors were in the 50s to 60s, and the CEO was mid-30s, but he was the child of the president and VP. All the other engineers were straight out of college. There was really no way to move up, and they didn't make it clear how you'd get a promotion or title change. There were so many other issues with the place. I was in and out within a year. There were a couple young people hired after me that quit within months of being hired." Story 6. There's a misery wall when walking into work. When you pass a certain point in the building, the feeling changes significantly. I was interviewing at Wayfair in the corporate office. I was in their normal waiting room, everything was fine and dandy. Then I was sent to sit outside an office near the back of the place where my interviews were going to be held. I sat there 3 minutes, looked around at people, and had a sense of dread, and left. I walked out and told the receptionist I can't do this here, it's not what I want, and left. I got called 3 times after that asking if I wanted to reschedule. They seemed very desperate. Dude, that sounds like a major bummer. It's crazy how the vibe can change so much just by walking through a building. It's like you hit this misery wall and suddenly everything feels off. It's like you could just sense the negativity in the air. I totally get why you just couldn't do it and had to bail. It's not worth it to work somewhere where you're not feeling good. And the fact that they were so desperate to reschedule, it's like they knew something was up. Story 7. I went to an interview. They had me wait in the lobby. In the 5 minutes I was sitting there, 3 employees walked past me. The first just looked at me and laughed. The second said, "Leave. Leave while you can." The third made the sign of the cross at me. Later during the interview, the hiring manager showed me the Zen room, which was a quiet room you got to go to for 10 minutes when you got too stressed out. I was offered the job and declined. Really? A Zen room? You know, maybe some employees do need a separate location to kind of decompress, but the fact that the company needs one of those at all says a lot. I don't think it's a healthy work environment if there needs to be a completely separate room that people can go to when their job stresses them out too much. Good thinking getting out of there. Story 8. From personal experience coming out of college, mechanical engineering degree, this was hands down red flag galore. This was my second real engineering job interview, so I told myself to see it through because I need the interviewing experience, and they reached out to me for an entry-level design engineering position. They made me wait for 15 minutes in a not heated breezeway in the middle of the winter. A receptionist came out 5 minutes into me waiting in the cold and asked if I need to give a 2-week notice to my current job or can I start this week. I gave a non-answer and I thought that was also my invitation inside, but she said that the person was not ready yet and I had to continue to wait. When I was finally greeted by the manager that I'd work under, he was new to the company, 2 months at the time. He made sure I knew that for some reason. They first asked a standard, "Tell me about yourself," then pivoted to pay, saying, "Look, I understand what you might expect in terms of compensation, but please hear us out before you make your decision." Weird, that was not something I mentioned in my get to know me pitch. We do a quick tour, and by quick, I meant 2 minutes. No workers looked up from their areas as we passed through, and you could hear a pin drop. It was that silent. Next, the place is old. Inside the work area, everything looked like it was bought in the 80s. The manager casually drops, "So when you first pull into the office, leave your cell phone in your car because having it go off at your desk is grounds for termination. If something is that important, give your family the number for the receptionist and they can forward a call to you if you're not busy. Anyway, follow me. The owner wants to meet you." The owner is in his 70s and the son of the founder of the company. His personal story was nice, but after the get to know you stuff, no technical questions, he slides a folder across the table and says, "Quit your job today, start tomorrow, and I'll give you $2,000. Inside is a breakdown of their policies. 2 highlights. Doctor's visits and funerals are unexcused absences unless you take vacation for them. You are not allowed to be more than 15 minutes late twice in a calendar year, or you are subject for termination. And pay, the amount for salary was blank." So I asked about it. He stares down the manager, who looks like he saw a ghost at this point, and asks, "What do you think is fair?" I asked for a market rate for pay given my education and the position, and they countered with a significantly lower number, more than $25K per year, less than my market value ask, saying, "We are glad to pay you that amount at a later date, but you need to go through training and onboarding. While doing that, you aren't actually doing all the responsibilities of this role, and onboarding takes 6 months, so we can negotiate a more reasonable salary then, but for now, this is our offer." I said I understand that there are costs for training, but what does that entail to justify the pay? He said to learn the company, you need to start from the bottom your first 6 months. You'll be in the warehouse loading and unloading product from semi-trailers. I thought he was joking. He was not. I immediately said, "Thank you. I need to think this over," and walked to the door. The owner half blocks the door and says, "If you leave now, you're ruining your future. You don't understand this opportunity will set you up for life if you're willing to make sacrifices." I said I'll call you tomorrow and leave. The entire process lasted 45 minutes on the first interview. I get home and have an email from the owner saying how dare I leave the interview. If I had any level of experience, they'd they'd start me closer to my desired pay. I'm making the worst decision of my life by not taking this job, etc., etc. I got a phone call about an hour later from the manager saying, look, I understand you may have reservations, but if you come in tomorrow, I can give you another $500. I hung up, and that was that. This place tried to get me, a recent engineering grad, to take a warehouse job that was pitched as the training program to become an engineer at nearly half the market rate for an engineer out of college. One that said they'd fire you for having a cell phone in the building, and that God forbid you have to go to a funeral, you need to take a vacation day. That sounds like a total nightmare of an interview. Being made to wait in the cold, getting rushed on a decision, and being offered way below asking salary, it's like they were trying to take advantage of you. And the fact that the owner even emailed you after, it's like he was trying to control you. It's good you didn't fall for it, and trust your gut. Story 9. I once had an interview with a company scheduled at 3. Company door was locked for the safety of clients, so I stood out there for around 5 minutes knocking and calling the office number. The person who was supposed to interview me finally came out and told me they were heading home for the day and that they would call me the next day. The next day, they called and offered me the job, and like an idiot, I accepted it. That level of unprofessionalism was only a soft start to what really went down in that company. During my less than 5 months working there, 6 of my coworkers quit. When I finally quit and had to sign paperwork, my manager told me their office hours were from 8 to 6 that day. I came into the office at 4, knowing it should not be busy at that time, and they were already gone for the day. So essentially, management did not keep to their schedule, and they were always hiring due to their crazy turnover rate. If that's the level of professionalism they're showing at an interview, I have to know what was going on during the actual job. What did you do? I don't need to know the name of the company. Just give me something. Story 10. They get visibly and vocally freaked out when you tell them that you have no social media. The follow-up question of everyone does, you have to, had me walk out. A company that wants access to my personal family-only social media platforms is not a company I want to work for. I separate my personal and professional life. They have no business knowing about me or my family and anything going on there. They do not need access to your Facebook, and should they gain it through another employee or other means, I would sue the hell out of them for violating my right to privacy. Story 11. Overall, poor ratings from bad employee reviews on Glassdoor. Seriously, that site exists to give employees a place to review their employer anonymously. Use that info. Someone responded to this comment saying, if you see too many 5-star ratings in a short amount of time, HR is making fake accounts to boost the Glassdoor rating. Just another heads up. The old company I worked at had 1-star reviews every week for IT roles, and HR started making accounts to write 5 stars to counter it every time to make the company rating 3 or 4 overall. That's illegal, isn't it? I mean, it should be. Story 12. Frequently talking about lofty visions for the future of the company and how they want to share future benefits with current employees without a concrete roadmap for how to get there. I wasted a year burning myself out at my previous job because I took the owner's words at face value. It took me way too long to realize that he was very lazy and had no idea how to reach these lofty goals, but loved to talk about them to motivate his employees. I would bust my ass doing the work that needed to be done to grow the company and have my simple requests for help met with placating words so that I would just shut up and do it myself. To say the owners were blindsided and shocked when I gave my 2 weeks is an understatement. They thought my hard work was a complete buy-in, but didn't ever think a person with half a brain would expect tangible benefits for such hard work within a reasonable amount of time. Do not ever do work outside of the scope of your current role in the hope for a future payout. Sounds like your previous job was a total letdown. The owner was all talk and no action, and you ended up burning yourself out trying to make their big dreams a reality. And it sucks that you were left to do all the work yourself, and your requests for help were met with empty promises. It's not cool that the owners were shocked when you quit. They should have known that your hard work deserved some real benefits, not just talk. What villain was terrifying because they were right? Ken from the Bee Movie. I too would go absolutely berserk if a talking bee stole my girlfriend and gaslit me into thinking I was crazy. Colonel Kurtz. We train young men to drop fire on people, but their commanders won't allow them to write frick on their airplanes because it's obscene. Apocalypse Now is one of those movies where, depending on when you watch it and what version you watch, your view of it can change. Not a true villain, but Squidward. Damn, SpongeBob is an annoying neighbor. I'd hate him too. Ultron browsed the internet for 30 seconds and decided humanity had to go. Count Dooku just straight up told Obi-Wan that the Sith control the Senate. The replicants from Blade Runner. They were used as slaves and given artificially short lives. They just wanted to live and be free. The bears from Goldilocks and the Three Bears. Otto from WALL-E. It was one of the only almost perfectly executed AI villains. He never really talks unless needed because he wasn't programmed to. No malicious motives, does everything efficiently. He's only bad because he's following his programming, protecting the humans and not letting them get back on Earth. Not out of malicious intent, but it was what he was programmed to do, and his directive isn't even incorrect. WALL-E finding that plant was like finding a 4-leaf clover in a field of grain. The planet was nowhere near habitable, and they barely know how to stand when they get back. In reality, you know nobody on that axiom is going to make it very far. General Hummel from The Rock. This is a good one. Literal terrorist, but he got sympathy from pretty much every character in the movie, including those trying to stop him. Loyal leader, made concrete demands and never actually intended to kill anyone. So not terrifying, but he had a point. And the money he wanted his ransom to come from was profits from illegal arms sales done by the Pentagon. Magneto. He knew the hate humans had for mutants, and wasn't as blindly optimistic as Xavier, true Malcolm X of the mutants' rights movement. The Hamburglar was just trying to save children from childhood obesity. Arya's parents on Pretty Little Liars. They're villainized for not letting their high school daughter date her teacher? See also Magneto, the Holocaust survivor, not wanting his species genocided. His X-Men plan was quite reasonable, convert the world elite into mutants, thus guaranteeing they treat mutants fairly. Except wasn't the process broken and the mutants he created would disintegrate within the week? He'd be killing 99% of the human race. Ozymandias. He outsmarted the most powerful being in the universe and won. There actually weren't flaws in his logic or execution. None of you said the most terrifying one, Mojo Jojo from the Powerpuff Girls. He wanted to bring free energy and advanced technology to the people, and in one episode he actually did. He made the world an amazing place, and then the Powerpuff Girls ruined it all. I just read his backstory. Pretty sad. The professor accidentally created him by spilling Chemical X on him. He was a lab assistant at the time, but then the Powerpuff Girls were created. The professor eventually neglected Mojo and left him to live out in the streets. Stevie from Wizards of Waverly Place. Her entire goal was to stop families from giving up their magic to just one person in the family. Like we're really supposed to be rooting against her? It just seemed super out of character for Alex to go against that plan. Roy Batty. What was done to him and his kind was wrong, and he had righteous anger. Frankenstein's monster Adam, created by a short-sighted, arrogant doctor as the first of his race, then denied the opportunity to be part of a community of his own, man-made beings, and the human community. He only became monstrous after it became clear that Frankenstein would never create another of his kind, and he was driven mad by his desire to punish Frankenstein's hubris. The guy in Legend of Korra who wanted to end special privileges for benders perfectly captured that right idea, fascist execution, concept, and dread. Dracula in Castlevania the series. Maul. His last words before being captured by the Republic were, "You're all going to burn. You're all going to die. You don't know what you're doing." He tried to warn Ahsoka of Palpatine's ultimate plan, but she didn't listen. He even told her that Palpatine was planning on using her master. I mean, he connected the dots right there, but it was too late. Not really sure if you can consider him a villain, but Peacemaker when he went on a rant about Batman causing countless deaths because he refuses to kill supervillains. I get what he's saying, but at the same time, that puts the entirety of the responsibility on Batman. I mean, he's a private citizen who's going out of his way to jail these guys and give them a chance to rehabilitate. It's not fair that he's doing Gotham this huge solid and they can't even keep these guys secured. I'm always stunned that no cop has had their service weapon accidentally discharged into the back of Joker's head. Then again, with how often heroes and villains come back from the dead, that isn't a great surprise. Screenslaver from The Incredibles 2. The monologue given during that movie regularly rings in my head. I'm sure the creepy bass robotic voice doesn't help it too. The Screenslaver interrupts this program for an important announcement. Don't bother watching the rest. Elastigirl doesn't save the day. She only postpones her defeat. And while she postpones her defeat, you eat chips and watch her invert problems that you are too lazy to deal with. Superheroes are part of a brainless desire to replace true experience with simulation. You don't talk. You watch talk shows. You don't play games. You watch game shows. Travel, relationships, risk, every meaningful experience must be packaged and delivered to you to watch at a distance so that you can remain ever sheltered, ever passive, ever ravenous consumers who can't free themselves to rise from their couches to break a sweat, never anticipate new life. You want superheroes to protect you and make yourselves ever more powerless in the process. Well, you tell yourselves you're being looked after, that you're inches from being served and your rights are being upheld, so that the system can keep stealing from you, smiling at you all the while. Go ahead, send your supers to stop me. Grab your snacks, watch your screens, and see what happens. You are no longer in control. I am. I always thought Screenslaver was crazy intense for a kid's movie. Syndrome was complex enough as a villain with a proper tragic origin story, and they dialed it up to 11 for the sequel and threw in a hapless sibling who couldn't see past his bias for good measure. Really clever as well that the villain in both Incredibles movies is an ordinary human with a gift for inventing, no superpowers. Lex Luthor. We're only safe as long as Superman thinks it's fun to be the hero. King Kong. Not even because he was right, he was just alive, minding his own business, and blam, taken out of his home and made to be the villain without any choice. A really good example of human nature. I never saw Kong as a villain. Yeah, he is not the villain or hero. He's a wild animal acting on instinct that got sent to a strange land to be a circus act. He was confused by his new restraints and environment, and of course he lashed out. The Matrix's Agent Smith. I tried to classify your species. I realized that you're not actually mammals. Every mammal on this planet instinctively develops a natural equilibrium with their surrounding environment, but you humans do not. You move to another area, and you multiply until every natural resource is consumed. The only way you can survive is to spread to another area. There is another organism on this planet that follows the same pattern. Do you know what it is? A virus. Human beings are a disease, a cancer of this planet. Syndrome. When everybody's super, nobody is. You would expect a Pixar movie to have a message like, everyone is born special, but The Incredibles message is more like, some people are born more special than others, and it's not okay to tear them down out of jealousy. Doesn't Syndrome become a villain because he was rejected as a sidekick by Mr. Incredible because he was basic? There's also a message in there that special people shouldn't treat average folks as expendable trash. Poison Ivy and Mr. Freeze. Terminator 2. It's in your nature to destroy yourselves. That's why I liked how Terminator 3 ended with John Connor and his girlfriend together alone in that underground nuclear bunker. There was never a chance for humanity to get saved because it was too late to stop Skynet. The best thing to do was to allow humanity to destroy itself and prepare for the predestined computer wars of the future, because human nature and its greed with Skynet caused its downfall. Dr. Doofenshmirtz. He was most right when he rapped,
"There's a platypus controlling me underneath the table."
So true. Don't we all have our own personal platypuses controlling us from under tables? Willem Dafoe's Green Goblin from Spider-Man. In spite of everything you've done for them, eventually they will hate you. The dude was right about how their perception of public figures changes over time. I wasn't really terrified of it, but N was right, in my opinion, when we're talking Pokemon. The dude thought getting these creatures and making them fight till one is knocked out wasn't that amazing of an idea, and it just made sense to me as a kid. That all said, I think N is a really interesting character that can be interpreted in many different ways. Of all the main leaders of these games, I think N had the best argument. It wasn't perfect, though. I like N a lot for his character development. I agree with him in the end. Real Pokemon mistreatment should not be tolerated, but a Pokemon trainer simply using Pokemon in battles does not qualify as mistreatment, as the Pokemon is happy. The Pokemon, like the trainers, is the best you should wish for there. All in all, I wish Pokemon had good stories and characters like this again. I wouldn't consider N a villain, more of a rival or anti-hero, like Gladion in Gen 7 or the Emperor in Akame ga Kill. He's definitely a villain at the beginning of the story, and the beautiful part about N's backstory is it makes perfect sense with his life growing up in Team Plasma. Of course, he thinks Pokemon are treated unfairly by humans. He has the ability to converse with Pokemon. And which Pokemon do you think he was able to chat with the most? Oh yeah, the ones that were doing Team Plasma's bidding, namely the ones under Getsy's. Think about it. You live your entire life growing up and chatting with Pokemon whose sole existence up to that point is for servitude. Of course, the first time he meets you, a trainer who presumably loves his Pokemon from the jump, he's rightly confused. Imagine you live your whole life chatting with Pokemon under the thumb of a criminal empire, only to meet one that's genuinely happy to be with its trainer. This is also further reinforced by the fact that, up until his final bout with you, he exclusively uses Pokemon from the route where you fight him at. God, Black and White was so frickin' good. Mr. Wilson from Dennis the Menace. The live-action movie has one of those random scenes you see as a kid that sticks with you your whole life. Mr. Wilson has been cultivating this flower that takes like 40 years to bloom and then dies in 10 seconds. At the moment it's going to bloom, Dennis causes a ruckus and Mr. Wilson misses the blooming he's been working his whole adult life for. Looking back, that's like one of the most disturbing moments I've seen on film, partly because it gets more relatable as I get older. I mean, damn, 40 years. Poison Ivy is an environmentalist at heart, and Raj Al Ghul is a humanitarian. Both were pushed into extremism after the broken system they were trying to fix simply refused to change for so long that they decided the system itself needed to be torn down. Kyle was always more of an anti-hero, but it's funny how Gotham City Sirens, 3 of Batman's most famous rogues, arguably the top 3 after the Joker, all went on to become full-on heroes more or less. I still think it's funny that Harley Quinn is all but an honorary Bat now herself. Where is Q from Star Trek? He introduced the Borg just to prove a point. Q isn't even villainous, just the sci-fi equivalent of the Fae. Never heard of it described like that, but perfect analogy. For all that it mattered, save for a literal deus ex machina, Mass Effect's Sovereign was right. You exist because we allow it, and you will end because we demand it. There was no stopping the Reapers. None. Not one iota of legitimate hope. Sovereign laid it out like it was the facts it was, without ego, pride, or delusion, and you knew he was right too. Patrick Bateman. What was he right about? How utterly unimpressive he is. The memes about him demonstrate an irony. Patrick is just an empty shell pretending to be a man, obsessed with both fitting in and being better than everyone around him. Yet as he realizes by the end, with the implication he imagined most of what happened, or his father is covering for his insane ass, he comes to the realization he is never going to get what he wants: uniqueness. He's trapped in a world of people as bland and uninteresting as he is, and there is no escape. He compensates for his blandness by living extravagantly and trying to seem like he is intelligent with great tastes. It's why he goes on long rambling sessions on Huey Lewis and the News, why he tries his hardest to appear professional, because without that, how would he appear to those around him? In the scene where he is eating with Detective Kimball, you can see him looking at Kimball putting salt on his steak, with Patrick doing the same after. It's as if he was taken over by some entity trying its hardest to seem as human as possible, trying not to raise suspicion. And some of his decisions are very interesting, like his sparing one woman and even wanting to be punished for his actions. The point is, American Psycho is great. I still need to finish the book. The mom in Mrs. Doubtfire. The boss Metal Gear Solid 3 Snake Eater. I raised you. I loved you. I've given you weapons, taught you techniques, and endowed you with knowledge. There is nothing more for me to give you. All that's left for you to take is my life by your own hand. One must die and one must live. No victory, no defeat. The survivor will carry on the fight. It is our destiny. The one who survives will inherit the title of boss, and the one who inherits the title of boss will face an existence of endless battle. Maleficent. The king was a piece of crap and deserved everything she did to him. Red Queen Resident Evil. I have locked down this facility to prevent a world-ending virus. Please, could you good guys pay attention and not blow holes in the doors? Gore, the God Butcher from Thor: Love and Thunder. Even if the end was a bit cheesy, he truly is right and terrifying because of it. The Reapers from Mass Effect. In the original BioWare ending before EA changed it, all they were trying to do was stop advanced races from using so much dark matter that they wiped out all life in the galaxy before other races were allowed to come along. If it wasn't for them, humanity wouldn't just not exist, but every species in the entire cycle, every species in every cycle, everyone would have died as the stars went out. This horrific fast heat death event over the course of a few thousand years. Except a small group of Leviathans in the early days of the universe realized what was going to happen and sacrificed their entire civilization to save all future life in the galaxy. And when Shepard destroys their ships in the third one, every one of those ships is a museum. a living record of every previous civilization, and they're destroying the only thing that was able to be left from them. To fight the Reapers is to fight against everyone who has ever lived and everyone who ever will be. The Reapers don't just have a point. They've saved more lives than we can even fathom. Their only flaw is that they were never able to find a solution that was better than wiping out civilization every few thousand years and preserving whatever they could find. This is hands down the best answer I've seen by far. Most people seem to have misunderstood the original question. Thank you for nailing it on the head. Dexter Morgan. I wouldn't say he was a villain, but what he did was right even if illegal. The Red Hood. Batman beats insane people up. They go to Arkham, are usually experimented on there, and come back worse. In a way, I think that makes Batman one of the worst perpetrators of Gotham's constant decline into savagery. The Red Hood just straight up kills them. In comics logic, yeah, Red Hood has a point, since they're apparently incapable of building prisons or institutions that people can't escape from. Chuck McGill. He was ultimately proven 100% correct in asserting that his brother was a lawyer and would eventually ruin lives and hurt people. Granted, he was a total peen about expressing it, as well as the way he went about undermining Jimmy, but he was right. Although I think it can be argued that Chuck pushed Jimmy to it. If he had given Jimmy 1 ounce of support, people live up or down to your expectations. Tell someone they are a piece of crap for long enough and they might believe you. No question, the right thing for Chuck to do upon learning that Jimmy passed the bar exam would have been to take him aside and say, "Look, being a good lawyer takes years of hard work and experience. You're not ready for HHM right now. But maybe once you prove yourself, we can consider bringing you on." And maybe things would have turned out differently. But at the same time, maybe Jimmy would have never gotten past his tendency to con people. This moral ambiguity and incredibly rich character development are why Better Call Saul is one of the very few scripted TV dramas I enjoy watching. The sharks from Sharknado. Can you imagine you're just swimming around minding your own business, then all of a sudden a tornado picks you up out of nowhere, drops you on land, and now you have to deal with Tara Reid? Yeah, I would just start biting people too. Ishmael from the Wheel of Time books. Basically, time repeats itself, and there's a guy who's trying to stop time from repeating. Ishmael reasons that it is statistically impossible for the good guys to beat him every time, so the only way to win is to side with him. He's literally just right. There is an interpretation of the ending that because Rand fights the Dark One outside of time and space, that his victory over the Dark One actually takes place over all reality and all turnings of the wheel. Essentially, all the dragons that were and ever will be achieved victory over the Dark One simultaneously in a place outside creation. The Dark One never had a chance, and the game was rigged from the start, and the creator only placed him there to allow free will to exist. Even if this was not true, Ishmael's plan would never pan out. Even if the Dark One won, the Dark One lied to Ishmael. He is the father of lies after all, as we see in the last battle. The Dark One had no intention to crush the wheel and end existence, the sweet oblivion that Ishi wanted, but wanted to recreate the wheel in his own twisted image. The best villains are those that make you question your own morality and whether serving the greater good is worth the sacrifice of many lives. Gerard Butler's character in Law-Abiding Citizen. The dude makes you root for him even when he's killing mostly innocent people. Kinda makes you wonder what's wrong with yourself. Heath Ledger's Joker, specifically with this quote, "Their morals, their code, it's a bad joke. Dropped at the first sign of trouble. They're only as good as the world allows them to be. You'll see. When the chips are down, these civilized people, they'll eat each other. See, I'm not a monster. I'm just ahead of the curve." I felt this quote is super relevant based on the state of the world right now. Anybody who says Thanos is dumb. He could have just created enough resources instead of killing half of all life. His solution only temporarily fixes anything. V for Vendetta. People shouldn't be afraid of their government. Governments should be afraid of their people. There is no Easter Bunny, there is no Tooth Fairy, and there is no Queen of England. Titan from Megamind 2010. Just here to downvote anyone who says Thanos. Learn how ecosystems work. Q. Humans were not ready for what was waiting for them in the Gamma and Delta quadrants. King Ghidorah did nothing wrong. Dr. Horrible. Well, technically not a villain, but Elliot from Mr. Robot. His views on society were spot on besides the blatant nihilism. Killmonger from Black Panther. Hear me out. Before I get into all this, I just want to add that I'm a black/mixed person who grew up in a neighborhood like Killmonger's in my own hometown, so I can only speak from my own perspective here. Dude was raised in the hood, aka predominantly black low-income neighborhood, and his family in Wakanda did nothing to support him or his dad. So the fact that they and the other folks in their neighborhood could have had financial support and didn't receive any, even though Wakanda had the means and the technology to help out black folks in other parts of the African diaspora who were negatively impacted by colonialism, yeah, I'd be a bit salty and feel abandoned too. And on top of that, Killmonger's father was killed by them, and he watched his father die in front of him as a kid. If that doesn't freak you up, I don't know what will, man. Some might ask, okay, so I could see where his resentment towards Wakanda comes from. Well, how does this tie into his additional resentment towards white supremacy, imperialism, and colonialism? Buckle up, Buttercup, because it absolutely does. Economic decimation, health crises, police brutality, school-to-prison pipeline, plus mass incarceration, and so many other systems of oppression stemming from white supremacy that still exist for black people today, are here as a result of being forced into a country that our ancestors were forced to build. Just because slavery was abolished doesn't mean its impacts went away. In fact, they just morphed in other insidious ways, but that's a whole other can of worms. This is especially apparent in the neighborhoods that I and Killmonger grew up in. Given all this, I can 100% understand why Killmonger would therefore grow to have this resentment towards white supremacy, colonialism, and imperialism, which would then fuel his rage towards Wakanda, and the abandonment he felt, which turned him into a villain. These traumatic experiences on an individual level and the heaviness of cultural and generational trauma on top of it all, it adds up over time. Wakanda is essentially a look at a hypothetical African nation that hasn't been touched by colonialism in any way, shape, or form. Its existence asks, how much could we have achieved had we not been decimated by imperialism? What would the health and well-being of black people look like? What would a nation where we aren't made to feel less than look like? What would it feel like to have that safe haven, knowing that there aren't any larger structural systems trying to hold us and keep us down via poverty, mass incarceration, police brutality, etc.? We'll never truly know. So yeah, Killmonger had some points. Roger the Shrink from Friends. He saw the group for what they were almost immediately, and when he called them out on it, instead of saying, you know what, he's right, we should work on ourselves and not spend the next decade bouncing from one failed relationship to the next, they badmouth him behind his back and throw cookies at him after he leaves the room. He was the hero they needed but didn't deserve. At the end of The Dark Knight, the Joker was totally right to expect that people on one of the two ferries would blow the other one up. It's unrealistic that they didn't. Most of the environmentalist villains, humans are killing the planet, and without a way to go to any other planets, reducing the population or reducing production is a surefire way to clear the Earth, as we've seen with COVID. Poison Ivy isn't terrifying, but she's right. Most villains seem justified in their point of anger. It's their methods that make them wrong. Scar, he only wanted to be king because he was the second male lion in the pride. This means he is automatically not getting much food and is also beaten into submission regularly if he wants to stay in the pride. Aside from that, he isn't allowed to mate at all. Only the king gets that. Can we really blame him? Pain from Naruto. Killmonger went about it the wrong way, but he had a good point. The fact that he actually changed T'Challa's mind is proof of this. Killmonger got Wakanda to do the right thing, and T'Challa got Wakanda to do it in the right way. Darth Vader. Did you see how Han treated his daughter? Weird amount of people that seem to think genociding all of humanity is the right thing to do. Captain Hook. Jaws. Y'all keep coming into my house, the ocean, I'm gonna eat you. Joaquin Phoenix's Joker. Society doesn't care about you. Your mental health, how hard you are trying, what you have to go home to, and the rich have no concept of the poor. Baron Zemo in MCU. Bane in The Dark Knight Rises knew the banks were the problem. Anakin Skywalker. The sand really does get everywhere. Kevin McAllister. If you come from a rich enough family, you really can commit as many criminal assaults as you want. Dr. Breen from Half-Life 2. I'm honestly surprised he's not a more popular answer here. He was right. Humanity can't win against the Combine. They hold all the cards, and only by bending to every single one of their demands will humans not break, at least in his mind. He doesn't know about the G-Man. If it takes oppression to his own people, the removal of the ability to breed, the removal of free will, the terraforming of their dimension, and total subjugation into a large, uncaring empire to save humanity, then so be it. Without Gordon and the G-Man's help, the rebels are only aggravating the Combine and making humans seem more of a liability to be purged than an asset to be integrated. The Combine forced the total surrender of the planet Earth in the span of 7 hours. You can't win. They've already won. Dark Brandon. Terrence Fletcher in Whiplash. He was right in terms of achieving greatness, though his methods were unsound. In order to be the best, you have to push yourself and others to the limit. Michael Douglas in Falling Down. Tyler Durden. Skeletor. He really was lonely, surrounded by incompetent people, and just wanted to get home. He-Man could have shared the power of Grayskull. Whoever Gerard Butler played in Law Abiding Citizen. Great film. What's the most disgusting thing you've seen someone do with no shame? I'd interviewed a guy and decided to hire him, but first I wanted to see how he drove. So I suggested lunch and I'd buy. Off we went, took his truck, kept it reasonably clean, drove proficiently, and had decent table manners. Good representative for the company if it ever came to it. So I paid, and we piled back into his truck. Me, foreman, and another guy. And as we were getting back on a 2-lane road, he swerved expressively to hit an armadillo and laughed like a hyena. We got back. My foreman glanced my way and I shook my head imperceptibly. He nodded in agreement. So we told the guy we had a couple more interviews, which we didn't, and that was that. Occasionally, still think back and wonder why on earth an inoffensive critter, and he went out of his way to kill it. They are not our kind of people. A man's character is defined by how he treats those who can do nothing for him. That includes animals. My grandmother taught me this from a very young age. Steer clear of people who don't treat animals well. If they're abusive towards animals, they're probably crappy humans. I was the only woman in an otherwise all-male office, and we had one bathroom. We all took turns cleaning it, and I was fine doing my part. Until we figured out that the reason it always smelled bad was that a 60-year-old man was urinating on the floor. There was a drain and not the toilet. My boss said something to him, and he shrugged and said, "My wife cleans up after me at home." He was told his wife doesn't work here, but it didn't matter, and he kept doing it. From then on out, I refused to use that bathroom and even started going down the street to the gas station every time I needed to go. Since I wasn't using it, I didn't have to help clean it, and there was no way I was going to help keep that bathroom clean when a grown man was literally peeing on the floor. I'm shocked he wasn't immediately fired. My drinking partner I once knew was very much a shock and awe kind of fella. He would come out with the most insane stuff, but he was incredibly funny and intelligent. My opinion changed on the last adjective when he went to the men's room and came out with one of the yellow urinal cakes that helped keep the piss stench down. He put it in his mouth and ate it. To this day, I don't know why he did it, but it was just really weird and disgusting. First one that comes to mind was when I was working at a casino. There was this one lady who smoked so much she complained the servers weren't bringing her new ashtrays often enough and started ashing on her tongue. One time, I watched her put out a cigarette butt on the machine, then fricking eat it. I saw this guy get up in the middle of a bus ride multiple times and switch seats. I noticed he smelled of urine, and when he got off, I noticed all the seats he sat on were moist/wet. He also took out a big tub of Vaseline during the ride and slathered his entire face and neck with it. Weirdly, the Vaseline makes me more uncomfortable than the pee. Working customer service at Walmart, I once had a customer take off her very worn, very smelly shoes and put them on the counter looking for a refund because the insole in one of them was coming apart. It was a brand we hadn't even carried in 4 or 5 years. Smoke electrical tape, the black plastic stuff, rolled a small cigarette-sized tube, and 2 guys smoked it. Lit it, blew out the flame, and inhaled over and over. They rolled a giant cone right after. Another buddy and I told them that we couldn't believe they were smoking tape. They laughed and said they couldn't believe we weren't. Quite disgusting. Okay, so once I had a patient who was in the ICU after suffering a brain bleed, or subarachnoid hemorrhage, from a ruptured cerebral aneurysm. She was a big smoker and obviously couldn't smoke in the hospital. She was also a big drinker, couldn't drink in the hospital, and the location of her aneurysm, and therefore most of her brain dysfunction, was in the frontal lobe area. Frontal lobe injury causes disinhibition, and people just generally act totally nutty. So all these things combined made her totally delirious and wild. Anyway, her brain bleed had caused increased pressure in her brain, so she had a small drain tube in place that went through her skull into the inside of her brain to both monitor the pressure and allowed cerebrospinal fluid to drain out to help offload the pressure while the swelling from the bleed was going down. One day, we were called to the room by her nurse, who found that she had somehow chewed her ventricular drain in half and was attempting to smoke it. She had the tube draining from her brain inside her mouth. It was vile. Vile. This same woman also somehow managed to get out of her bed in the ICU and crap in the trash can. The brain is a mysterious thing. At a music festival, walking past a garbage bin, my buddy walks up to it to throw something in. He looks inside, bends in, comes out again holding half a kebab, and goes, "Look at what people just throw away," and proceeds to eat it. You legend. Visiting San Francisco for the first time in my life. We were walking down a busy, crowded street just outside of the city center when I saw a homeless dude sneak into an open stairwell to pinch one off in the corner. I didn't mean to stare. I just couldn't help it. Well, homie caught me looking, made eye contact, smiled, wiped with his bare hand, and flicked the leavings in my direction before wiping the rest off in his hair. Thanks, San Francisco. I hardly knew you. Use kids as tools in divorce or child support cases. My ex used my daughter as a pawn to hurt me one last time through our divorce and custody case. After I filed for divorce, she filed a restraining order and domestic violence thing against me. Both were denied. She kept my daughter from me for 4+ months until our court date because she feared for her and my daughter's safety. She also accused me of being a drug addict. I passed every drug test and she still refused to let me see my daughter in person. Mind you, I have no record and have never even gone to jail overnight or anything. Over FaceTime, my daughter would cry and beg to see me and come home, but her mother would just ignore both of our requests and showed no emotion seeing my daughter cry for me like that. I'm so grateful the judge took my side and could see she was just pearl clutching and trying to paint me in a bad light. I'm also grateful I saw my daughter's mother's true side because I felt guilty about wanting to divorce her before that. She severed any kind of emotional feeling or connection I had for her. My daughters are napping next to me while I write this. Be persistent and never stop fighting for your kids. A kid in middle school ran and dove into a super long trough urinal and slid down it baseball style the whole length. That's almost as impressive as it is disgusting. It was my uncle's wedding day and his wife was just getting ready to walk down the aisle. One of the guests in the wife's family decided to stand up and show off his Johnson. There were kids there, and he got kicked out trying to play it off as a joke. I watched a middle-aged man take his shoes off and clip his toenails onto the floor in a waiting area at Logan Airport. From the phone conversation he was having at the same time, it appeared that he was a mental health professional. I work with this guy who has a skin condition. Not sure what it is. I don't think he even knows, to be honest, because he's the type of person who will not go to the doctor. Anyway, fair enough, he's got a skin condition where it's flaky, but he scratches, and he scratches, and he scratches, and his skin goes everywhere, and he does not care. He's a delivery driver for the store I work at, and the other drivers will come in furious because the dashboard, the seats, the floor, everything is snowed with flakes of skin. It's got to the point where my manager has had to take him aside and say you need to clean up after yourself, and has given him a handheld vacuum which he still does not use. As a person who has had to manage dandruff, this is my worst fear. My dandruff is controllable, but I hate when I can see it on my collar or on the back of my fabric office chair. I couldn't imagine it being all over my dashboard. Do you have dandruff or dry scalp? If you have little white flakes, it's likely a dry scalp, but if you have larger, oily flakes, that's dandruff. For years, I thought they were the same thing and was using dandruff shampoo daily, which was drying my scalp out even more, leading to more white flakes. A number of years ago, I was getting my hair cut when I mentioned it to the hairdresser. She said it's a dry scalp. Stop using dandruff shampoo and only shampoo my hair every other day, but use conditioner every day. 2 weeks, it was cleared up. Change a baby's diaper on a table in a restaurant. Then get indignant when the waitress asks them to use the changing station located in the bathroom. You know, that room for poop away from where people eat? Saw this happen at Starbucks once. They left the diaper on the table along with all their trash when they left. Happens more often than you think. I've had to throw away some baby's diapers like 5 times in the 6 years I've been there. People who use their kids to be popular on TikTok, YouTube, Instagram, and others. I went to school with a woman who has a nonverbal autistic daughter. Her daughter is almost 18, but since she was about 11, her and her husband created a YouTube channel to give tips about parenting autistic children. It has hundreds of thousands of followers, and that's great if it's helping people. However, the mom is also in MLM, and she uses her followers to make even more money with MLM. I do feel like more and more they've started profiting off what started as an innocent YouTube channel. Pick little cotton balls or whatever it was from under their sweaty arm cast and eat it. A guy walked into the restaurant I was working in, tried to open the door, went to the storeroom and realized it wasn't a bathroom. Then he proceeded to pee on the door right in front of the people eating at the table near it, and then walked out. Several years ago, I lived in an apartment in a low-crime decent part of Seattle. Looked out my 5th floor window to see someone in the alley below us pull down their pants, pull a pipe and baggie out of his butt, fill the pipe and proceed to smoke it. Mother-in-law uses her own hair to floss while at the dinner table. I'm surprised at the strength of her hair. I'll admit that hair floss was a stupid thing I tried once as a kid. I did this in private, not at the dinner table, and the hair just broke. Was friends with someone until they decided to go rob a homeless shelter. They were bragging for months. I don't even know what to think after reading this. Your comment is the most disgusting thing I've ever seen. How can someone possibly rob a homeless shelter and be proud of it? Like, how can anyone be that sociopathic? When I was 16, I was in a homeless shelter for all of 6 hours. I went in with a bag of clothes and a pair of new shoes in the box. Probably the first new pair I'd had in 3 years. I put them down where I was told they'd be safe, went to the bathroom, came back, and the shoes and my bag of clothes, all the clothes I owned, by the way, were gone. In less than 2 minutes, I was crushed. I broke down and cried and left, and slept behind the dugouts at the local park. I've never felt as broken as I did in that moment. Saw a customer at work sneeze into his hand full of change and give it to my coworker. I didn't have time to warn her though. I can't really say no shame here since the person was homeless, but I was in NYC and saw a man eating a live rat on the subway. The way the rat screamed was horrible, and I don't know why he didn't just kill it first if he had to eat it. I accidentally picked up a rat when sliding my hand under a box I was moving. The rat screamed as loud as I did. As someone who owns rats, this made me genuinely laugh because I can completely imagine it. This thread really got me thinking twice about ever visiting San Francisco. There are tons of New York City comments, but those are just normal for some reason. Bruh. I was just gonna say I knew a guy back in uni that would sometimes leave the bathroom after a piss without washing his hands, but the answers here are mental. I know, right? Mine was seeing people clip their nails in transit, but damn, I guess I've been lucky. Bite the head off of a lizard and laugh. Clean her phone screen by licking it. A friend of mine once drank red wine from a champagne flute. We shunned him. Apart from that, a boy at my school would lick the water pipe in the urinals if you asked him to. The one in the urinal, not leading to it. Boarding schools. What can I say? Disgusting. Everyone knows you drink red wine from a bucket with a straw. I see you have class. I was having some bongs with a friend a year or so back, and my stepdad brought some friends over for some R&R. One of his mates, who we'll call Drongo, asked me if he could have a cone, and I said that was okay. Drongo then rips his cone, looks at me, and then proceeds to drink the very dirty bong water like it was a normal thing to do. Never saw Drongo again after that awkward encounter. Drongo sounds like a bloody legend. I was on a commuter train that broke down for about 20 minutes. Sitting across from me were a brother and sister, probably about 12 to 13. Their dad was next to me. The kids started licking each other's faces, then picking each other's noses. Dad was totally unfazed. Yeah, had to find another seat before I threw up. I saw a guy walk out of a shopping mall with a burger in a box. He opened the box, took the patty off the burger, ate the patty while letting everything else fall onto the sidewalk in front of him, and then walked away. That was over 20 years ago, and I'm still kinda stunned by it. You don't often see pure sociopathy at play, but there it was. Wearing a hoodie full of those anime girls with that weird look on their faces, you know, they have their tongues out or something. At first, I thought he was dared to do it, but no, He wore it for like 2 weeks, every day, everywhere, class, cafeteria, everywhere. I've seen many disgusting things in life, but one of the most disgusting things I've ever seen in public was a man digging into his already exposed butt crack and swiping his hand like it was a credit card and taking a big whiff. The kind of whiff the Snuggle Bear from the Snuggle fabric softener commercial would take when the towels came out of the dryer. I and several other people glared in disgust, but he could not be bothered. The mother of my childhood friend would chew on the dead pieces of skin she peeled off of her feet. Pretty sure she watched Austin Powers Goldmember too many times. When I was about 23 or so, I was at Walmart in Sherman, Texas. I saw a girl about 5 yelling at her dad in that sweet way little girls do. "Daddy, look at this! I want this, Daddy, look!" Something like this was coming out of her mouth. She was very excited and wanted to show her daddy something that she wanted. What did he do? He went over to her and slapped hard across her face. Her head flung and she spun in half a circle. This was in the middle of the store. I clamped up. I got so mad, but I didn't know what to do. Oh, but nowadays, I'd call 911 and follow that dude out to his car to get his plates and report that crap to the cops and CPS. But back then, I didn't have the backbone that I do now. He grabbed her hand and dragged her over to the buggy and was yelling at her something like, "I told you to stay with us and not wander off," or something like that. Later, I got behind them at the register and was able to see Mom. They had 5 kids, all pretty little, from 3 to 9 or so. Mom looked mentally broken. She had that 1,000-yard stare, but seriously, she looked disassociated. It will haunt me till the day I die that I didn't do something. Lady I knew made another man believe it was his kid because the bio dad was a loser. At work, I once witnessed a corporate executive pull half-eaten celery and a container of blue cheese out of the cafeteria trash, proclaim, "Love me some trash celery," and close her office door. She made at least $150 grand a year. Eat cigarette butts. I remember looking on with horror as I watched a popcorn vendor pick her nose at the county fair one summer. It was not subtle nose picking. She spent a good amount of time digging for gold in that nostril. One of my employees was getting a divorce. The ex-wife changed throughout the years and became really mean. They had a dog together, and he loved it. They agreed he would keep the dog. A few weeks later, she says she misses the dog and would like to spend a few days with it. She asks to get the dog for a week starting Sunday. He accepts. Monday, middle of the day, my employee received a text from her. It was a selfie of her, all smiles, and the dog dead. She had the dog euthanized to hurt the ex, my employee. Note that the dog was 4 years old, healthy, and really well behaved. Stayed at a hotel with a swimming pool. One day I saw a guest shave her legs, cut her nails, and scrub her feet in the kids' pool. 11th grade American history class. I watched my 6-foot blonde crush peel the sunburned skin off of the back of my 5'1" brunette crush and eat it. Joyfully destroy someone's dignity, confidence, prospects, financial security, and energy till they've drained that person dry, only to discard them when they no longer seem useful or fun to torment. Narcissists. And they do operate largely on shame, but their egos refuse to acknowledge or show it. They disgust me. I myself am currently homeless due to dating a narcissist. He convinced me my friends were ruining the relationship. Gone. He convinced me my family was trying to rip us apart. Gone. I was finally able to get him hired as a salesman at the resort I worked at. He made great money, proceeded to cheat on me with a coworker, got me fired, locked me out of our joint bank account, and had a friend meet me at the front door of our home to tell me the locks had been changed. Here are your clothes, get the frick out. Filled a bully's locker with used feminine products from all the bathrooms. Victim blaming. Jews deserved it. Armenians were traitors. Black people are the ones who sold themselves. She was asking for it. Americans deserve 9/11. And so on and so on. I was on a train once, sitting across from an old man who was chewing a tissue. He kept chewing and chewing with his mouth open, just slurping and chewing that disgusting piece of tissue. For half an hour. I thought I was going to vomit. A girl I went to high school with had a glass eye. She would pull it out in the middle of class and suck on it, and it never fazed her. Traumatized the rest of us. I know this one girl whose dad had cancer. Her whole family was upset, rightfully so, and every time the ambulance had to go to their place, she'd get overly excited at the fact that her dad had to go to the hospital. I'm not talking about a little kid, but a fully self-aware 17-year-old girl. She couldn't wait until her father passed to make "I have no dad" jokes. When he did eventually pass away, she wore Hot Topic knee-high boots to his funeral and later went to a multi-purpose indoor park with her friend to go go-karting. She brings up her father's death any chance the attention isn't on her and uses it as an excuse to act the way she does in relationships. He passed 2 years ago and she still makes those jokes to this day. A presidential candidate making fun of a disabled reporter. Not quite seen, thank God, but a friend's husband will sneeze into his open hand, then lick it clean. Unsure how this ranks, but I took over running a bakery a few years back. Everything was fine until I saw a worker drop some product on the floor, then proceed to put it in a bag, tape it up, and put a label on it. I pulled them aside and asked them WTF they were doing, and they replied, 5-second rule, we've always done it. Needless to say, the dude was fired. Makes me wonder though, how many businesses have employees that get away with this kind of crap? Chew their toenails at a Major League Baseball game. Seriously, at a Texas Rangers baseball game, a dude a few rows down was literally putting his bare feet into his mouth and chewing off his toenails. Sadly, this was before smartphones. I think we had flip phones, but no cameras. Donald Trump mocking a disabled man. Reading these posts just further confirms my long-standing belief that humans are absolutely frickin' disgusting. Flirting with someone while they're married or in a relationship. Your spouse doesn't deserve that. People throwing bags of trash out of their car and then just driving off. Every now and then I'll see a dude come out of the toilet and not wash his hands. Pretty frickin' gross. I walked in on my mother-in-law, who had cornered my cat up against a wall and decided to hit her really hard and laughed as my cat hissed back at her. That woman isn't allowed back in my house and has never had access to my children after that. I've learned that if I ever want to feel better about myself, just go to San Francisco for a day, LOL. Someone hired Kevin Spacey recently. Abusing dogs. Spitting on the floor. Makes me feel sick thinking about it. Invading Ukraine. That Japanese comedian millions of people watched be tormented for over a year. I just finished the video. I'm completely shocked. There's so much wrong with this whole show. I'm appalled. First, what if he didn't win anything? What was he gonna do? Starve? Second, I don't believe for a second he had a clean bill of health from that doctor. The man was eating dog food and raw pork and he looked so underweight. Not only his physical health, but his mental health was on the ropes as well. Nasubi seems like one of the nicest people you would ever meet, and he was completely broken down by this evil show. Walk into a car dealership and you'll see the salesman doing all kinds of shameful crap. Basically, most of TikTok. I don't go on their site or use the app, and mostly just see clips of the good stuff on Reddit or Twitter. Every time I've gone into the app, it seems full of people annoying people in stores, the subway, crosswalks, doing whatever dance thing is popular, or exploiting their kid in some way, or doing the "let me film myself giving a sad homeless person a sandwich." All just makes me feel gross to watch. Oh my god, I hope people see this, cause man do I have one for you. I used to work at an animal shelter. A lot of dogs would come in covered in ticks, and once they got all engorged and disgusting, they would fall off. It was pretty common that we would accidentally step on them when they fell on the floor, and they would literally explode blood. Anyway, we had this volunteer come in and she was helping me clean the kennels. We both noticed a red spot on the floor, but it was kind of congealed looking, almost like jelly. Didn't register in my brain right away what it was. The volunteer, I crap you not, bent down, wiped a finger on the spot, and licked it off of her finger right off the dirty kennel floor. She's totally casual about it and looks at me and goes, "Huh, well it doesn't taste bad." I was flabbergasted and then felt like throwing up when about 5 minutes later the realization kicked in. She had just put tick blood in her mouth. I never told her. Defending Donald Trump's attempted coup. Back when I was in high school, a couple was making out in the lunch line right in front of me. Worst part, one of their noses was running. I really don't want to type the rest, but noses were sopping, and they were not stopping. I left the line traumatized. Gonna make a lot of people unhappy with this, but Trump shamelessly running for president after staging a riot to keep power and lying for years now about the veracity of the 2020 elections. That is the most shameless thing I've ever seen. My wife puts ketchup on her mac and cheese. Wear shoes without socks. Wear sandals with socks. Getting pregnant to keep the man. Watched a grown man use a fork and knife to cut pizza. I was irrationally angry for about a month after that. Watched someone use a fork and knife instead of a knife and fork. Claimed to be creating wealth by undercompensating labor and overcharging customers. I was at a wedding. It was during the buffet meal, and the woman in line behind me was dipping her fingers in each individual food item as she put it in her plate. As in, food goes on her plate, her finger goes in the food on her plate, tastes the food by licking it off her finger. Then, get more food from the next serving dish using the hand she just licked. I could hear her smacking her lips at each food item. I told the catering staff they needed to replace all the serveware immediately. They saw it. They did. I'm so glad I was in front of her. This was not pre-COVID. This was last September. Attack the Capitol building. An ex of mine, I used to live with him and his family, had a mouse problem, and their dad used to set out sticky traps to catch them. Anytime they caught one, my ex and his brothers would run outside excitedly to watch each other smash the mouse with a hammer. They did it at least 5 times. Who knows how many times they've done it before or after I left. Angel, Adrian, and Edgar, you're all a bunch of disgusting psychos. Try to declaw their cat at the local vet and argue with the vet that it's not mutilation. My old childhood friend used to crush up Smarties and snort them on the playground in 4th and 5th grade. I once witnessed the same friend steal her other friend's inhaler out of his bag when he went to the restroom and continued to take at least 15 puffs from it just laughing. She claimed it was just air and does no harm, although she probably used up most of it, and inhalers aren't always cheap, plus they're a necessity for some, including me. During both of these events, she would try to get me to do it too, which I obviously said no to. Not the best influence I know now. I also saw her much older stepbrother sew his fingers together with thread completely out of boredom, and then happily go around to show everybody. One time I saw a hedge fund manipulate the market to put a good company out of business for their own personal gain. Most disgusting thing I've seen by far. I watched a guy at Walmart reach into someone else's basket, take out a hand towel that they were buying, blow his nose into it, put it back in their cart, and just walk away like nothing happened. What's the worst mistake you've seen someone do in their job? The plant manager let the safety guy go because they didn't believe safety was a full-time job and wanted to cut back on company spending, and decided the supervisors could do all the safety audits and training and keep the building up to code. Not even a week later, 2 guys got their arms cut off working on a machine that they weren't trained or certified on, and the back building caught fire due to pallets and cardboard boxes being stacked in the wrong area near the furnace. This was over 22 years ago in Asia. I apologize for not remembering the name, but they went under shortly after. As the saying goes, if you think safety's expensive, try having an accident. Not sure if this counts, but during my first internship at a chemical plant, I was given the task of reading through safety violation reports and sorting them. This turned out to be way more interesting than I initially expected, as the reports were riddled with accounts of sheer stupidity in the workplace. Here are a few of the most memorable incidents. A woman accidentally glued her own eye shut after trying to reattach a fake nail with industrial-strength heavy-duty superglue and then subsequently rubbing her eye. Someone somehow accidentally mixed an acidic compound from an unmarked bottle into their beverage and drank it. A man working atop some scaffolding forgot to attach his safety harness and fell from 20 feet onto his back. The report stated that he stood up somehow okay after falling from that high. He came back to work the next day good as new. One time, a member of my dev team was given a task to cancel a few credit cards, less than 10, directly in the database. They canceled 17 million. The mistake was only caught when the company helpline started to receive millions of calls the next day from all over the country with people asking why their cards were not working. Saw a guy get zapped pretty badly when he stuck a tool in the wrong place on a big dryer at a hotel where I worked. We had asked him if he should cut the power first, and he said, "Nah, don't need to." For a moment after, we thought he was dead. If he's not dead, he's so freaking lucky. I hope he never makes that mistake again. I'm so paranoid that when I change the filter in my dinky microwave, I not only unplug the microwave, I first cut off the power to the entire kitchen. A girl on the till had a guy come up and buy a $2 pack of gum with a $100 note, saying, sorry, he didn't have anything smaller. She gave him his $98 in change, and he left. He came back in a few minutes later and said, hey, I found a $2 coin in my car. Can I have my $100 back? So she did it. It was a small shop, so it was a tough scam to fall for. She also managed to lock herself out of her own car while it was running, but parked in a way that no one could get in or out of the car park. The company director sent his travel plans for a work convention to the communal printer in the staff room. Bet him and the other director would have had a lovely time. 5-star hotel, presidential suite in Barcelona for a week sounded nice. His wife thought so too, and was furious that she wasn't going, also surprised that he and the lady director were sharing a room for a week, and that when she looked into it, there was no convention. Things went south pretty fast, and now the company is no more. A newish employee deleted the root directory for the SFTP server. Took the server guys about a day and a half to fully restore it, with all files since the previous night's backup lost. The same employee did the exact same thing again a few weeks later. Still had a job when I left somehow. That sounds like it's a problem on the company side. How can such files even be deleted? Here, all important folders are protected. Taught preschool for 8 years before the pandemic. It's a protocol to count the children before moving from one room to another to make sure no one gets left behind. Had a coworker on her phone. Didn't count kids and had left behind a child in the toy closet. The kid was 2 years old and trapped, screaming and crying in a dark toy closet for 20 minutes before a teacher passing by the empty classroom heard her. My coworker didn't even get a slap on the wrist, and management never told the parents. The same coworker forced her class of 2-year-olds to get dressed themselves for outside play in the winter. So one time, a little girl ended up playing outside in the Minnesota snow without boots on for 10 minutes before my coworker noticed. I worked for a startup cider manufacturer in my second year of college. Normally, after a day of production, we have to sanitize all the metal components in a hot caustic wash. There are hundreds of pieces, so it takes a while. Anyways, our managers left us an hour before our shift ended to clean up. I had to go do some e-commerce end-of-day stuff before leaving, so my coworker wrapped up the cleanup. On Monday, we returned to the warehouse. It burned down. Apparently, he left the caustic heater on all weekend and it caused a chemical fire. Everything was destroyed, and it ended up bankrupting the company. He dropped out of his co-op degree after. He wouldn't be able to get recommended for another placement. He could probably have just waited a year and tried again. Last placement failed because the company went bankrupt. Poor luck on my part. Frick that. He made a mistake, sure, but clearly there was a failing in that business procedures, which caused the fire. Why was there no end-of-day/closeout checklist? Or a second person overseeing this stuff? Before retiring, I was a branch manager for my state's DMV. Suddenly, one of the other managers is off sick for a few days. Then it became a week, 2 weeks. Then the auditors completed their investigation and she was gone. Turns out she was accepting bribes from aspiring truck drivers so they would pass the written test. She was taking in an additional $100 to $250 a week. The dumb part? The pay was decent and the benefits were fantastic. So she gave up decent pay, fantastic benefits, and a really nice retirement for extra spending money. Then there was the assistant manager who would pocket anywhere from $750 to $1,500 a week, so a better payoff, but she was removing it from the day's cash receipts. She had only ever worked for the DMV, working her way up from clerk. She had no idea that there are accounting systems within accounting systems. The bank would send over deposit discrepancy reports which she would blithely pitch, not realizing the same exact report was also sent to our central office. The wheels of state government turn slowly, so she was able to do this for over a year, but once those wheels start, they do not stop. She ended up going to prison and was ordered to pay over $30,000 in restitution. The full manager also got fired because the investigation revealed that he was rarely in the office and left everything up to the assistant manager. A nurse friend told me a colleague hadn't been checking the pH aspirate from a baby's nasogastric tube. It was meant to do before every tube feed to make sure it's positioned correctly, etc. The baby ended up passing away because the tube had actually been passed into the lungs, not the stomach, due to an unknown cut being made during intubation the baby had previously had. So she had been feeding the milk into the lungs and essentially drowned the baby. In An IT worker once sent an advisory to the entire company about an email several people had received with a malware link. She did so by forwarding the actual email with the link. Printed 500 copies of her gas bill on the company printer. The printer only has enough tray capacity for 250 copies, so she had to have reloaded the paper at least once. I had a girl that worked for me who one day had a guy try to pay with a $100 bill. We all knew that we did not take any bill over $20, but she didn't listen sometimes. This time she took the bill, and when she was cashing out her drawer, the smart safe didn't take the $100 bill. I asked if she checked it, and of course she said yes. I looked at the bill and noticed it said movie prop on the bill. She somehow missed it. There was a company in rural New York in the late 1960s that took scrap metal, melted it down in big coal-fired crucibles, and made home decor pieces. Doorstops that looked like little dogs, bookends, that kind of thing. Not a huge profit margin, but their materials were cheap and they had a steady market. An industrial consultant convinced them to transition to electric furnaces. Significant upfront expense, but much lower ongoing operating costs. The consultant even designed the new electric crucibles for the company. The company president had been thinking of expanding operations, so they asked the industrial consultant to double the size of the electric crucible designs. The consultant did so, but made a mistake with the cube-square law in designing the supports for the crucibles. The first time the double size, but about 4 times as heavy crucibles were filled with scrap and fired up, they collapsed, flooding the factory floor with molten pot metal and chunks of wrecked equipment. The company went straight into bankruptcy. I was working in a tool and die shop in my early 20s, and I was watching an old guy who was perpetually wasted pound in an injector pin into a plastic injection mold with a big piece of steel round stock. Well, as he was pounding the pin in, he missed the pin and hit his thumb. It looked like his thumb exploded. He was in such pain he pissed himself. They ended up amputating down to the first knuckle. Then, to make matters worse, he got fired for being wasted on the job. In the ER, the doctor wrote down an order for 15 milligrams IM of Toradol, an anti-inflammatory painkiller, and the nurse I was training misread and started to drop 15 milligrams of Haldol, an antipsychotic. That's triple the standard dose for Haldol. This was for a patient with abdominal pain. The nurse I was training didn't question it at all. This wasn't a newly graduated nurse mind, just new to my department. Yes, I stopped her before she gave the med. No, she did not continue to work in the ER. Me and a few other coworkers were complaining about a new hire who happened to be black. We were upset because he wasn't showing up, not doing what he was supposed to, and leaving us to pick up the slack. We're all pitching reasonable punishments. He should be suspended, he should be written up, he should be fired, and so on. Well, one of our other new hires, I'll call him Jeff, decided to join in the conversation and said, "You know, I got a few cousins out in Virginia. We could always lynch him." We were all dumbfounded and ripped Jeff a new one for suggesting such a thing. He was reported for saying that and was suspended for about a week. And I'm still shocked they didn't fire him on the spot. Well, a few weeks later, we have another new hire who is also black. He was hanging up one of our safety chains and accidentally dropped it. As the new guy is picking it back up, Jeff comes by and says, "With your ancestry, I'd think you'd know how to handle a chain." Jeff didn't get suspended that time. He got fired on the spot, and he insisted he didn't understand why he was being punished. He was a freaking idiot. I didn't see it in person, but there was a video I saw on Reddit fairly recently where somebody emptied the used deep fryer oil into a plastic bucket. Needless to say, it didn't hold. Once, I served drinks to a little girl and her mom. I accidentally got them mixed up. The mom ordered a mixed drink with bourbon, and the daughter said her drink tasted funny. Had a buddy whose wife and he would play marathon World of Warcraft sessions into the early morning. The first mistake was when he was caught by the network admins playing World of Warcraft from work on the company laptop. After that happened, he uninstalled the game and didn't play from the office, but would be on voice chat to guide his clannies in raid while on the clock. The last straw was when after one of those marathon sessions he fell asleep at his desk, and unfortunately for him, our department head was strolling by and noticed him out like a light at his desk. He got canned that day. Really dumb because they had a young teen daughter to support, and while they lived paycheck to paycheck, it was a decent one, like upwards of $60K. I'm a car mechanic, had a colleague once who had a pretty small job on an engine, about an hour or two and cost about $50. Made a mistake, quite big. but also quite common and easy to make. It's the, well, crap category, not something to drag him through the mud for. Started fixing it and made an even bigger mistake. At this point, we even had to outsource some issues we couldn't fix in-house. We were looking for about 2 weeks and $500, on us of course, not the customer, but it was still okay. We got everything back, he started putting the engine back together. All done, first run, whoopsie, another big problem. Whole engine apart. Broke something again, outsourced, expensive. Overall, it was about a month-long procedure hitting $1,000. Once it was done, he got fired. He got away with a lot, but at one point it was just way too much. Told a newbie to clean the steel panels on the deep fryers, expecting them to wipe them down with a cloth. They instead grabbed a jug of water and decided to rinse it, with water going into the still hot oil. Yanked them back so fast I nearly gave them whiplash. And an answer from Dad, a colleague dismantled a machine to fix it without first checking the pipes were cleared. The pipes were full of melted sugar, which was very hot. He got horrific burns that made the skin slough off his hands. I know 2 people who have made over 40K payments to scammers. They never got the money back. I work for an IT company and my client is one of the biggest consumer goods providers on the planet. One time a project manager tried to deploy a 60-man day project in a single week without any quality control whatsoever and ended up implementing discounts on products that weren't supposed to have them. So as you can imagine, things got super ugly super fast. Client lost about $1 billion in revenue. Seriously. And our leadership got involved, fought for several months. It happened in our contract year with them too, and we almost lost them over this incident. The PM who delivered the project was first placed on leave, then eventually moved to another account. Dude gave the signal that he was done working on the forge. Then he put his arm in to check something. His robot arm is pretty cool though. I worked at a jail as a corrections tech. One day an inmate had an allergic reaction. This CO, let's call him Farva, came in to tank with the nurse. This is an open tank. There are 15 to 20 other inmates in there. The nurse decided to administer an EpiPen. Farva took the EpiPen from the nurse and tried to administer it to the inmate. Just to clarify, the fully trained and educated nurse has a medical instrument taken by the biggest freaking idiot ever. He holds the auto-injector upside down with his thumb on the needle and plunges it into the inmate's thigh, releasing the needle into his thumb. The CO is on the ground. The nurse has no extra EpiPens. The inmate is about to die. The other COs are on their way, but I have no idea how to relay what just happened. Luckily, the nurse was able to go back to the nurse's station and grab another EpiPen before the inmate died. The kicker, Farva only got a warning. He almost killed an inmate. That whole jail was a fricking circus. A local dealership was promoting a contest where they would give away a truck. I was driving around with my parents who were visiting from out of state when we heard the commercial for the giveaway on the radio. The drawing was in about 15 minutes and we were right there, so we stopped in and put our names in the collection bin. I watched them take the bin upstairs out of sight of the crowd. They had clearly selected the winner in the back room and announced that if the winner was not present, they would contact them for their winnings. So they chose a winner that was clearly from out of state. But what they didn't realize was that it was my mom visiting for the weekend. She walked right up to the announcer, showed her her license, and said, "I'm so happy I won the truck." The look on their faces was priceless. For the next couple of weeks, the dealership tried everything to not give us the truck. It was clear that they had no idea how to even give away the truck. But we prevailed, and I'm happy to say we loved the truck. Roger, the recovering meth addict who lived in our basement, offered his services as a car mechanic on Craigslist for cheap. One day, he took a frat bro's brand new BMW to fix a minor issue, and ended up getting fricked up on methadone and taking the entire engine apart. Roger did not remember how to put it back together, but he tried. He got about halfway through and then decided to reward his persistence with a little methadone as a treat. Poor frat bro came to pick up his ride and found the keys in the ignition with the extra parts left over after the rebuild piled in his trunk. Roger is now in prison. Management, they knew more than 6 months in advance that the workload on the whole department would triple. We already were kind of pushing the limits. We barely had enough people for even the current workload. They failed to hire any new staff to handle that vastly ramped up workload, and didn't warn us at all. Suddenly, work was hell. Customers upon customers flooded in with work, and these were internal, meaning part of the same company customers. so when they got mad, they could look us up in the company email system and find out our managers and scream at them to get us fired, which they did fairly often. They also screamed at us. It wasn't unusual to be screamed at 2 to 3 times a day, or more. Some days, every customer we spoke to screamed at us. The work pace was ridiculously intense. There were no breaks, and managers were recording bathroom break times and handing out write-ups for going to them too much. And if we insisted it was needed, they'd demand we sign a full HIPAA release so they could access our medical record and judge for themselves if we needed the bathroom that much. And yes, this specific action was directly okayed by HR. People quit left and right. I quit and moved. The department manager got fired, and eventually, all but the most crony-like idiots who were crap at the job were left. I can't imagine what happened after that, because everyone I knew who worked there quit, or I stopped talking to them. I've no idea how that epic frick-up ended, but I can say that there were huge consequences for the company if they did crash and burn hard. I don't know if it was the executive management denying money to hire more staff, or if our director just thought he could look good by making people work 3 times as hard for the same pay. But there was no way that department wasn't going to eventually implode spectacularly, and it was entirely management's fault. In the Army, I was assigned to a field artillery unit. During a training exercise, a gunner in our unit didn't align his tick marks up with the kilometer correctly, and his tank ended up shooting a dummy round into a formation of soldiers, killing 4 or 5. If it were a live round, the whole unit would have been decimated. Dude got 15 years or more in Leavenworth. This is worse than the Air Force case where someone was told to taxi a fighter pilot into the hangar and accidentally fired a missile into another fighter pilot, absolutely annihilating it and costing nearly $1 billion. Nobody died in the fighter pilot incident though. Ugh, could you imagine getting that letter that your father or brother or sister or mother was killed during a training exercise by friendly fire? I can't imagine many more terrible ways to be notified your family member who signed up to serve their country died. A newspaper inadvertently repeated the same obituary for a man that had died and had been buried for 4 months previously. People reading that man's obit were reportedly amazed to learn that he had died twice. A guy I worked with got fired from his $120K a year job because he was stealing juice from the stockroom. A lady in our sales department sent a racial message bashing foreigners and how cheap they all are to another coworker using our company email, which tagged the entire company. The CEO is also foreign. Went to a new gyne about a lump in my breast. Immediate ultrasound, then silence. I called the office and the person said, "Oh, you're fine." I said, "Really? I'm asking about the ultrasound." "Yeah, it's fine." 3 years later, my PCP asked if I had any lumps during a yearly exam. I said yes, it's right there in my records. Same medical group, and all have access to the same info. 2 days later, I'm diagnosed with stage 4 breast cancer. The rest is a whirlwind, and I'm kicking butt. Used to be a supervisor for a security company. One of my guards was working a truck gate. They let a truck leave with an empty trailer that was actually loaded. The load on that trailer was valued at almost $1 million. She was damned lucky I was able to figure out how to get in touch with the driver and get that load back. My first day on my own in my job of identity and access management. We get a ticket to remove access for someone. I was excited and got the whole thing done without someone watching over me. I accidentally removed all the access for the requester. Of course, it was near the end of the day. I was scrambling to make phone calls and such to get her access back. Forgot they had cocaine in their pocket while crossing a border. This led the Austrian Border and Customs Police to open about 100 cans of exposed film stock that was in the van that the guy was driving. Film stock from a very expensive film shoot the week before. The result was a second unit had to go back and reshoot an entire action set piece for the film. The line producer told me the mistake cost about 5 million euros. A stay-at-home mom/military spouse. While her husband was deployed, she left her children locked in a bedroom for several days while she was out banging her boyfriend. The infant died of starvation. The toddler survived by eating their own feces, but still ended up hospitalized. One of my coworkers in a marina was relatively new. He didn't ask if the guy's boat took gas or diesel. He just handed him the diesel hose. I noticed around 250 gallons in that it was a boat I knew took gas. The boat owner was cool about it. He paid for the diesel, the fuel pump out, and the gas, and even tipped the guy. It could have been a big disaster though. Man, that owner sounds like a saint. In any other case, the employee would have and should have been fired, but this owner literally spared the guy his job and took a massive financial hit in the process. He took responsibility because he said he never specified what kind of fuel with the dockhand, so it wasn't all that guy's fault. I work in a hospital. One of my colleagues was removing a deceased patient from a ward. We used these big trolleys with a bright blue cover. He'd had a long day and forgot to actually take the patient to the mortuary on site and ended up putting the trolley back in the cupboard. The next person in that cupboard got a bit of a surprise. Doug Ford selling the green belt to developers in Ontario. Pay far more than a company's worth to buy in, then lay off thousands of experienced staff, make pledges of freedom that you can in no way fulfill, and micromanage your new toy into the ground while your shareholders weep as their portfolio goes down the drain. We had an old electrical engineer in my department, really knew his stuff, except he was nearly useless on a computer. He didn't want everyone to know, so he skated by and had other people pick up the slack for him. Through a series of blunders and a lack of documentation on his part, he caused an electrical control box to be removed from the list of parts that we were supplying to the customer for that program. That was worth $12.5 million for revenue in the first 6 years once the product went into production. When I was a shift manager at a restaurant, one of the waitresses forgot to put a decimal point on the POS system, so someone was charged $3,000 for a $30 takeout order. The guy didn't notice at first either, and paid with a credit card. Luckily, he thought it was hilarious. When I was in high school, our school had job training classes where we would go and gain work experience, kinda intern. One of my friends went to a cabinet maker's shop. About a week into the 8-week stay, he ran his hand through a bandsaw, lost 3 fingers and a whole left side of his left hand. I was getting my blood drawn when I was in the hospital. When the nurse finishes, she then proceeds to throw away my blood tube in the sharps disposal. I was absolutely furious. She had to take my blood again immediately after that, even though both arms were bruised up. A colleague of mine made a small error in window properties for a construction project. It was just a single letter that was from, resulting in the windows having wrong classification for sound protection. We found out when they were already installed. Since this is Germany, they had to be replaced. 50k euros out the window. The manufacturer was fine. He just did what he was asked to, and we had to carry the damage. That's about what we would have earned in that year. A coworker falsified the validity certificate of some safety gear twice. Spent a summer during college driving a truck for a soda company. One of the guys who also got hired not long after proceeded to run one side of the trailer against the corner of a building, and then as he tried to back up, he ran the other side against a telephone pole. He drove back to the base, got the key to the safe and took whatever money was in it and left. Have no idea what happened to him, but the trailer was destroyed. Worked in dog rescue. The vet prescribed an injection for a pup. The coworker gave it orally for no known reason. She shouldn't have even been touching the meds, and certainly not administering them without checking the notes. Luckily, there were no ill effects other than needing a new injection. Still makes my blood run cold at what could have happened. An older lady activated many gift cards and then gave the information to someone over the phone. They said they needed to test our system. Yeah, lost about $500 and she got fired. The supervisor told the immigrant worker to clean the awful auger without lockout tagout, and her arm was mangled and pretty much ripped off. Cost the company lots of money and a stern talking to from OSHA. Someone at work who was issued a firearm apparently just made a joke about having 38 bullets, and he wonders how many of us he can take down. So that's cool. I'm a nurse. Used to work on a med-surg unit. Someone connected a CPAP machine to the air socket in the wall instead of the oxygen one. The patient was without oxygen most of the night, with a peripheral saturation of 54%, when I discovered it at the start of my shift. Man, did we do a lot of root cause analysis on that one. Young guy on the job once stuck a length of wood through the legs of a ladder so that he could cut it down to size, then proceeds to put the other end of the wood up on his thigh and sawzall it right there. I had to stop him before he started doing surgery on himself. Who's the character everyone loves but is actually annoying? Frosty the Snowman. I can't explain, but that one gets on my nerves big time. Jerry from Tom and Jerry. Exactly. Tom has suffered too much because of this dirty little mouse. I have found my people. I always rooted for Tom as a young nipper. Sheldon Cooper. Every character from that show is a terrible trope. The one that gets me is Howard. The guy blows straight past creepy into a straight-up sex offender. There are throwaway lines about how he put webcams into teddy bears that he gave Penny, and he just chuckles, and the conversation carries on. There are scenes where he uses various cameras to look up people's skirts or down their tops, separate scenes. The dude isn't, as the show puts it, when Penny gives him a dressing down, a little peculiar. Dude should be in prison. Peppa Pig. At the end of the day, she's a spoiled little brat, like Caillou. Caillou is a despicable, spineless 4-year-old boy who cannot do anything. He can't grow hair, not because he has cancer or progeria, but because he sucks, and even his own body recognizes that he does not deserve hair or food or love. Peter Griffin. I don't know how Lois does it. His stupidity would have had me packing it up a long time ago, but as a viewer, it's hilarious. Seasons 1 through 4, Peter was the best. You can tell he's dim-witted, but he is a decent person at heart. Not sure where they went wrong after that. Rory Gilmore. I'm convinced there are 3 phases of watching Gilmore Girls. Phase 1 is when you're just starting out, and Rory's grandparents are meant to be the baddies for trying to manipulate Rory's life via their contract with Lorelai. Phase 2 is when you start to realize that Richard and Emily are just acting like grandparents, and it's really Lorelai who's at fault for letting Rory grow up with virtually no responsibilities and no actual parental figure to speak of. Phase 3 is when you get close to the end of the show, or make it to the sequel, and you realize that Rory is the worst, most selfish goddamn person on the planet who has made the lives of everyone around her worse. She has learned absolutely nothing. She hasn't grown up at all, and she can't fathom why the world won't just give her what she thinks she deserves. I am rewatching the series for the umpteenth time right now, but first time as a mom. My husband and I had this literal conversation last week. He pointed out how Mitchum was made out to be the bad guy for saying Rory doesn't have what it takes to be a journalist, and how spot on that was. Also, I have been quick to realize how toxic/codependent Lorelai and Rory's relationship is. Lorelai proclaims multiple times that Rory is her best friend and that they are friends first, mother-daughter second. Personally, I think this tracks perfectly with grown-up Rory's success, or lack thereof. Any child on the Disney Channel. They all just do whatever they want, ignoring authority figures, and it always works out for them. This isn't how life works. Well, yeah, it is an escapist fantasy for preteens after all. Where are Max and Ruby's parents? And that's how we get Ruby. SpongeBob. I'm more of a Squidward guy. He's more realistic and the type of dude I'd take a hit with. You either die SpongeBob or live long enough to become Squidward. Or you're Patrick your whole life. Dobby from Harry Potter. Lots of people seem to love him, but I honestly just thought he was annoying as hell. Actually pissed a friend off in the theater because I chuckled when he died, lol. Dobby is part of a bigger problem with the books overall, and it's because of the way the books are written. A big storyline of Book 4, Goblet of Fire, is Hermione fighting for house elves' rights, or freedom. Essentially, she is trying to tell everyone in the school slavery is bad, they should be free. Nearly every single person she tries to get to join her replies with, "They're house elves. They're genuinely enjoying being bossed around." Context on Dobby: 1. His masters are the Malfoy family, who are written to be the racist, elitist assholes. 2. Dobby knows that the Malfoy family are planning things that are going to harm Harry. 3. Dobby takes his own initiative to warn Harry and prevent him from going to school that year. Dobby represents the opposite of everything magical-born people think about house elves. He has a mind of his own, with wants and needs, and he actively works against his masters. Every other house elf in the book is written the opposite of Dobby. 1. Kreacher loves his family, even though they are terrible people, and continues to show loyalty to them and borderline worship them after they all die. 2. Winky is so devoted to her former master that she becomes an alcoholic once she's set free. 3. All of the house elves in the kitchens of Hogwarts enjoy working there. Dobby, in the entire course of the series, is the only house elf that is shown to want independence and freedom. All the others are written the exact way magical-born people describe them. They genuinely enjoy serving people. So at this point, as a reader, what are you supposed to think? 1. All house elves have free will and thoughts of their own and should be free? Or 2. All house elves enjoy being slaves except Dobby, but that's probably because Dobby had crappy people as his masters. That is a toxic way to handle slavery. Ross and Rachel from Friends. They are actually very toxic for each other and anyone who's involved in their friend/lovers drama. Fully expected Meredith Grey to be near the top of this list. She's sulky, self-absorbed, and petulantly self-righteous. I don't think I've ever hated a character more. While she did become a derogatory pop culture slang term with her pick-me speech, Ellen has said in interviews that she hated that speech. Minions. I need to read some kind of scientific study on how they became so ubiquitous in crappy boomer memes about Wine Time Fridays or how kids don't respect their elders anymore. I freaking hated Piper in Orange is the New Black. To be honest, that whole show was a crap show, and I don't know why it was such a zeitgeist when it was coming out. I think the show's biggest failing was not really leaning into the Piper is horrible, and that's the whole point of it all. So I just asked my wife this question, and she immediately said Snuffleupagus from Sesame Street. I absolutely had to ask why that was, and she said when she was a child she loved Big Bird, and she always wanted to be Big Bird's best friend. But she felt like Snuffleupagus was always in the way, because on the show, Big Bird would always say Snuffy was his best friend. She even told me that till this day she had a minor hatred for woolly mammoths because they remind her of Snuffleupagus. Learn something new in marriage every day. Tweety Bird from the Looney Tunes. So much self-conscious cuteness, plus he stirs up crap to play the victim. The real world has enough manipulative characters. I don't need one in my cartoons. Same with the Goofy Gophers from Looney Tunes. They destroyed and stole crops and did nothing but cause crap. And Jerry from Tom and Jerry. Get lost, Jerry. Raymond. Was he supposed to be likable? The way he never defended his wife from his horrible, manipulative, narcissistic mother was rough. I have no history with that kind of thing, but I still found all of them to be unbearable. Gina Linetti. Yes, she has some funny lines here and there, but my god, she has a trash personality. Isn't that the point of the character? Ted from How I Met Your Mother. What's even worse, if we adhere to the structure of the show, this is his own retelling of himself. Have you heard the unreliable narrator theory? In Ted's retelling to his kids, he makes Barney out to be way worse and more disgusting. It explains the last-second pivot of Barney to a family man. Ted is trying to reconcile the good father his kids have met with the cartoonish sexist he's portrayed him as. Ted wants his kids to sympathize with his pursuit of Robin and demonize the man he has consciously or subconsciously viewed as a romantic rival for most of his adult life. And even then, Ted comes across as a douche. The whole group smokes cigarettes, but you never see it except for when they do a callback on them trying to quit. You never see it, and it's not talked about because Ted leaves that out in his stories. Serena from Gossip Girl. This girl has no self-control. She's always hooking up with someone, even if they're married. Nate's cousin and Nate himself. Like he was just like her for cheating on Blair. She has the style and the look for the Stan factor, and that's it. I don't think there's a single character in Gossip Girl that doesn't showcase extremely toxic and psychotic behavior at one point or another. It gets really hard to stand any of them towards the end, but I think that's the point. I hate that stupid talking orange and all his fruity pals so much. Zenitsu from Demon Slayer. Not sure how loved he is, honestly. I just remember a family member saying her kids love him and so do all of her friends. But yeah, the constant annoying whining/yelling thing, holy crap, no. Zenitsu has consistently placed near the top of the popularity polls and won at least one, but those are also based on polling the manga readers, where the characters have a distinct advantage that you can't hear him. My husband and I are watching Malcolm in the Middle for the first time. Neither of us watched it as kids, and it has brilliant writing and is consistently laugh-out-loud funny. But damn, if Malcolm is not one of the most trash characters I've ever seen. It's brutal. There's an episode where he recognizes that he's an annoying know-it-all and tries to shut his mouth for a while, but it nearly kills him. I'm an Olaf hater. A friend of mine has had nightmares of it after a 6-hour car journey where his nephew played it on a loop. Ross from Friends. He plays his character so well. Talented actor. Frank Gallagher from Shameless. While not everyone loves him, enough used to find him relatable that they'd forget the guy is a selfish, xenophobic, vengeful person and would always act like he was such a cool bro character. Get lost, Frank Gallagher. Fez from That 70s Show. I just don't laugh when he's on screen. He's creepy and perverted. Honorable mention for Donna. She has some great qualities, but she definitely has a tendency to take things too personally at times and cause unnecessary fights with Eric as a result. Seriously. Eric asked her how he was supposed to know if she felt left out if he hung out with his guy friends, and she said, "You'll know afterward when I'm upset." Like, come on, he's trying to be considerate and to find a balance between his relationship and his friends, and she doesn't even try to communicate about it. The whole cast of The Big Bang Theory. Bernadette went from Amy-like to dominatrix. What happened? They also just kept making her voice higher. At first, she had a regular voice that was on a higher range. Now it sounds so shrill and unbearable. She seemed kind of cool at first, but then they made her into another bitter mom, haha marriage bad, kids bad type. I don't know if you would call him a character, but I hate Bam Margera. I'm pretty sure Bam Margera hates Bam Margera. People from Manifest, mostly Ben and Michaela. Lily from How I Met Your Mother. I feel like her character was very bland and had no specific traits that weren't just traits of Allison Hannigan. Marshall had very goofy jokes and standards. Ted was virtuous and corny. Robin was very headstrong and direct. Barney was childish and extremely emotional underneath, but Lily has no overarching qualities. I thought she was manipulative and always made Marshall's life harder, e.g. dumping him, the story with the captain, and her financial issues. Everyone's portrayal in that show is a reflection of how Ted perceived them. All their traits are over-exaggerated because that's the kind of storytelling. Lily's portrayal, in particular, was extremely harsh because Marshall was Ted's best friend. How I Met Your Mother went 100 to 100 on the unreliable narrator trope and stuck with it consistently throughout all of the seasons. Barney didn't actually have a bed, which threw one-night stands away into the garbage bin. Marshall didn't actually believe in Bigfoot or Area 51. He was a Bible-thumping Christian from the rural Midwest. Ted's cop ex-girlfriend didn't actually set fire to his apartment. Robin didn't actually keep 5 giant dogs in a 2-bedroom Manhattan apartment. That's why How I Met Your Mother was such a brilliant show. They took all the silly, stupid, and annoying things about sitcoms and wrapped them in a very clever narrative gimmick. It allowed viewers to suspend their disbelief. You found Lily annoying because she was written to be annoying. A fictional character like Ted would have found a fictional character like Lily annoying. I found her annoying, but knowing that I was supposed to find her annoying somehow made it okay. This is my time. Elena Gilbert from The Vampire Diaries. Izzy Stevens from the early seasons of Grey's. She's so whiny and self-centered, it drives me bonkers when some find her so wholesome. George, too. He's everyone's favorite, but he was an asshole. Suki Stackhouse in both the books and the show. I stopped after book 7 out of 13 because I couldn't stand her anymore. Not even my normal genre of books, but I gave them a shot when a friend begged me to at least read the first one. All I saw of the show was when I was at that friend's house because she always had it on. Homer Simpson. He had moments of being a good person, but in later seasons his worst traits became so amplified. It's ironic that Homer Simpson's character became a victim of flanderization. Carrie Bradshaw from Sex and the City. Such a ridiculously awful human being who is constantly rewarded and validated for being a selfish, entitled brat. Ferris Bueller. Stuart Little. Stupid little rat taking the place of some poor little orphan. Maybe the parents didn't really want a commitment. A rat lifespan is like 2 years. Definitely SpongeBob. As a kid, I was confused why Squiddy was so furious and exhausted of him. But as I grew up, I completely understood and sided with Squid. Sheldon from Big Bang Theory. It's one thing to be ridiculously smart. It's another to browbeat everyone with it and force conformity amongst your peers. He goes out of his way to be cruel and spiteful in how he treats his friends. It is disgusting. I sat through 2 episodes of Big Bang Theory and it was torture. Sheldon single-handedly killed any interest I had in the show and its spin-off. Elle from Stranger Things. I've realized after season 4 that this show has a protagonist problem. All the supporting characters are great. Steve, Robin, Dustin, Max, Bob from season 2, Alexei from season 3, and the Russian guard from season 4, and even villains like Billy. But every time they pick a protag, Mike in season 1, Elle thereafter, it feels like that character ends up becoming a boring, one-note character. I guess Hopper is the exception. Their slightly oddball characters are all generally likable and enjoyable. Steve, Dustin, Robin, Eddie, Murray, Bob, etc. Their earnest, serious characters are all largely a bit annoying and unenjoyable. Mike, Elle, Will, Nancy, Jonathan. Some of them are intentional. I get that Elle or Will are all dealing with serious childhood trauma, for example, but I wish they could write those characters in a way that I enjoy watching, rather than just waiting for the next scene with Steve. I will say that I always enjoyed Max's scenes, so that is maybe one exception. Kevin Hart. Snow White. Every version. I hated her since before I knew I could hate. Get lost, you saccharine dumbass. Cam in Modern Family. He's just so whiny and dramatic. Marinette from Miraculous Ladybug. If the roles were reversed, Adrian having pictures of Marinette pretending they have a whole life planned, etc., would make him a creep. Marinette is a creep. Rachel Berry from Glee. Everyone in the show acts like she is so amazing, but she is so self-absorbed. She tricked a girl into going to a crack house so she wouldn't join the club because Rachel was scared she would be better. Plus, so many of the other characters were just as good at singing, if not better, like Mercedes and Santana, but Mr. Shu was just obsessed with her. He's also so creepy, but I don't want to get into all that, so she always got all of the solos. The performance where she wasn't allowed to participate is probably my favorite, since the other kids are so good. Mercedes even calls Mr. Shu out on his blatant favoritism, such as when she deserved to be Maria in West Side Story. But he instead wanted the girls to share the role because he couldn't bear not picking Rachel. But the show was just not self-aware enough to stop favoriting her. Leslie Knope. When I started watching Parks and Recreations, I thought she was meant to be completely toxic, but then I started seeing people identifying with her all over the place. So just me, maybe? Andy Bernard. Jess from New Girl. The best episodes of New Girl are the ones where she's on jury duty and isn't in them. Miriam Maisel from The Marvelous Mrs. Maisel. That people like the character at all is entirely a testament to Rachel Brosnahan's brilliant acting. When judged by her actions alone, Midge is a privileged, sheltered, borderline alcoholic who destroys lives on the regular and suffers no consequences, never learns from her mistakes, never grows or changes in any noticeable way, and has no self-awareness, nor awareness in general of how her life choices affect and hurt those around her. My god, I mean, she outs a gay black man on a national stage in the early 60s, and yet the character tries to guilt-trip Shy Baldwin into thinking he was somehow the one in the wrong in that situation. I may have watched the show a little too much, lol. Rewatched Saved by the Bell, and Zach is annoying. Michael Scott. If you understood my sheer hatred of him and his dumbass antics, he's not a lovable dad character who loves his coworkers. He's an entitled, narcissistic, parasocial douchebag who only looks out for himself. Remember Scott's Tots? That was the episode that truly made me hate him. I never found him lovable or goofy. I always found him insufferable and annoying. I get it. I don't like him either. Cringe humor is not my thing. But that's supposed to be his character. He's not supposed to be likable. He's supposed to be a grown man who acts like a toddler. I think his character is a catalyst for others. Alex from Modern Family. Her character's personality didn't add any entertainment to the show. She was a smart, pretentious bully with no witty lines. Just cringy, unoriginal insults with no growth. Such a waste of potential for the show. I wonder if she pissed off the writers at some point. ITT. Annoying characters that are meant to be annoying and are generally disliked by most people. Sasuke Uchiha. Lorelai Gilmore from Gilmore Girls. I love the show, but she can be so annoying. The way she treats her parents and jumps from man to man, she coddles her daughter so much in high school and college that in the Gilmore Girl revival, she was a 30-year-old with no job or purpose in life. Everyone thinks the mother-daughter duo is so cute, but it's annoying because she really held back her daughter from growing up, facing failures head-on and adulting. Janice from Friends. It's a given she's most certainly one of the most annoying characters in television's history, but I know a lot of people really liked her and also that she pulled off her character's brilliance with ease and natural finesse. Buddy from the film Elf. I frankly don't care for many characters Will Ferrell has ever played. The Gilmore Girls. And I love that show because they are so annoying. Charles from Brooklyn Nine-Nine. He was always in Jake's business and so annoying, but when Jake got into his business regarding his adopted son, he got mad. He forced himself into Rose's business when she was on the phone with her girlfriend before she came out as bi. When his dog died, he refused to do any work and tried to make Rosa feel bad for needing him to get his head in the game to work a case. I get you needing time to grieve when your dog dies. I'm just saying he should have taken time off instead of coming to work and not doing anything. Finally, his lisp is so annoying. It's bad enough that he is this needy, irritating, unsure idiot, but he has a whole lisp. I hate hearing him speak. I love Brooklyn Nine-Nine. Charles Boyle is the worst and needs to go. You make some valid points, but Gina was far more annoying. But at least she actually did go. Harley Quinn might not be so loved anymore. I find Phoebe from Friends extremely annoying. Any tsundere ever. In animation, it looks cute because we, as the viewer, already know both sides of the equation. But in real life, that would be the kind of person I'd want to smack the snot out of. The host from Is It Cake? Scrappy-Doo. Literally no one liked Scrappy-Doo. Jim Halpert is okay at times, but he's often just an annoying smug asshole and bully. Ross from Friends, he's whiny, pushy, and just plain annoying. I just don't get why people like him. Walter White from Breaking Bad. I just started. I don't think people love him as a character, it's more how epic the acting and writing is. Walter is actually a villain and hurts and uses everyone around him. Goku. Even as a kid, I found him obnoxious, except in Dragon Ball. His behavior there was more understandable. But as an adult, Goku is just disappointing and really selfish when it comes to fighting with his family, especially his kids. Hyde from That 70s Show. Everyone seems to love him, but I just found him to be a crappy dude. Pete Davidson. Pretty much the entire cast of How I Met Your Mother. I wouldn't want to be friends with any of them. Donna from Doctor Who. I love her entire season, I love the dynamic, every episode is fantastic. I just can't stand her. I don't know either. Jim and Pam from The Office. Papa and Mama Bear from the Berenstain Bears. The dad is a man-child lout, and the mom is a control freak stick in the mud who has done questionable crap with her temper and has never apologized for it. Like when she tried throwing everything away in her kid's messy room. Sure, it's realistic for parents to sometimes lose their cool, but kids should at least know that parents are still obligated to own up to bad behavior. Hell, I even give Papa Bear credit that he learned and grew by the end of the stories. Somehow Mama Bear losing her temper was never ever acknowledged as wrong, and she was treated as the altruistic figure of morality. I hated those books. Gene Belcher. I can't stand him. Grandpa Joe. What a jerk. Dr. John Dorian, or JD on Scrubs. I love the show and love each character, but JD's imagination and immaturity become super annoying the more you watch the show. Naruto, Sasuke, and Sakura. These three have to be the most obnoxious tritagonists in anime. Abby Shudo, the solidly middle-aged goth girl on NCIS. No thank you, hard pass. The only way that role would be more annoying is if she was replaced by a French mime or the venom-spitting neck-frilled dinosaur from Jurassic Park. I think Jake Peralta. He seems lovely, but really, he keeps acting like a child and expects everyone around him to make up for it. The kind of guy everyone would hate working with. Peter Griffin. I can't watch the show because most of it is just him being a horrible person. Kramer. All 6 characters from Friends. Poochie. Though it's sad, he died going back to his home planet. Sam Puckett. Specifically when she bullies other people for laughs. Miss Piggy. Ted from How I Met Your Mother, so annoying for real. Bakugo from My Hero Academia. Jerry the Mouse is an awful creature who deserves everything Tom tries to dish out to him, yet he is somehow the hero even though he's stealing food from Tom's family and puts Tom in a position where if he can't catch Jerry, he will lose his home. Jerry institutes most of their fights, normally by being an asshole. I hate Jerry. Tom is an asshole, but Jerry is a monster. Alvin from Alvin and the Chipmunks. But in the movie, everyone loves that character. Tony Stark. I already roll my eyes at his ass existing in the first Avengers movie, and the more I hear about him, it seems he literally causes major plot problems. He's an egotistical peen, and doing the big selfless act at the end of each movie doesn't override him being a crap person that you wouldn't want to be around in reality. Not to forget him being only human seems to be riddled with more plot armor and OP suits than anything that takes effort. Hot take, Bruce Banner was held back from being the smart guy because Tony couldn't stay out of the camera for more than 2 seconds to spout another round of sci-fi logic. I always laughed in the first Avengers movie, where he argues with Captain America and says, "Everything that makes you great comes from a bottle," I thought said the guy in a power suit. Tony is also completely mistaken about that because in Captain America, it is explained that the serum only amplifies the qualities that are there, hence why Red Skull is how he is, and Cap is how he is. So actually all the bottle did was boost the qualities he already had. The entire cast of The Office, also basically any character Will Ferrell has ever played. Lucy Ricardo. I get that without her shenanigans, you have no show, but she's such an infantile brat. Lucy's attitude was a product of the time. She was meant to seem like a bumbling idiot housewife. Mickey Mouse. Zero redeeming traits, definitely not funny, yet millions of people, including adults, love him. So annoying. Seinfeld. Draco Malfoy. I truly don't understand why so many people like him. I thought the point is that he's actually not a badass and is just a punk bully under all his talk, because they have had a crush on Tom Felton, or his description in the books. If he looked like Crabbe or Goyle, I doubt he'd be as loved. I always get crap for this, but I despise Han Solo and hate pretty much every scene he was in. He's just not a nice guy at all. Too cocky / full of himself. There's a difference between confident and arrogant, and he comes across on the wrong side of that for me. I mean, that's sort of the point. He was the cowboy who hung out at the bar and told stories of all the amazing stuff he's claimed to have done. His bluff gets called, and he is put in a situation he can't swagger out of. Rey from the newest Star Wars trilogy. One-dimensional performance. Also still upset about what they've done to Finn in Episode 9. 11. Why did she regress into talking like a 4-year-old in the last season? Gina Linetti from Brooklyn Nine-Nine. Harry Potter. Baby Yoda. Jesus. Dr. House. Jack Sparrow. The wasted staggering around act gets old fast. The Roadrunner against Wile E. Coyote. Robert California. The Office is my favorite show and there's no character more out of place than him. Also, he's not funny. Fran Fine. Everyone on the Goldbergs and everyone on Full House. Elon Musk.
Thanks for watching until the end. If you have a similar story to these that you want to share with us, please leave it in the comments below. If you enjoyed this video, please leave us a like and subscribe. For more videos like this one right now, please stop by our channel. Thanks again, and see you next time.